Hello survivors and welcome to First Aid Spray, a Resident Evil podcast by fans for fans. This is episode 71, wherein we'll be going to Alcatraz and reuniting with a long missing friend in our breakdown of the CGI film Resident Evil Death Island. My name is Sai, and joining me on the panel this week, like Jill Valentine, he might also disappear for 14 years and emerge wearing the same outfit, but in his case it'll be because of the long-awaited release of Baldur's Gate 3. It's Moist Owlet, aka James.
It's a really long intro, nice. Appreciate that.
Sorry, I'll go right to the opposite end of the spectrum. Kissed by dangerous bio-drones, it's Kelsey, aka KDB.
I'm not stopping to count them.
In 2015, our heroes assembled to save the world. Elsewhere, this man missed the call as he was too busy being hopelessly addicted to Revelations 2's raid mode. It's Fire Button Steve Valance.
Hi, everybody.
Every episode of First Aid Spray is recorded live on our Discord server, so join now to hear the show early and unedited and to become part of our fantastic little community where we discuss life, the universe, and Resident Evil. You can find a link to the server as well as all of our social media profiles at our website, faspraypod.com. It's the support of our listeners that keeps First Aid Spray going, so why not check out our merchandise or our Patreon page. Tiers begin at just $1 a month. Head over to patreon.com/faspraypod for a full list and the chance to create bonus First Aid Spray content. Okie dokie then. Let's talk about us for a little bit. Actually, let's talk about our Patreon specifically for a little bit. Welcome new Patreon member, the one and only JC Wesker. Thank you for supporting the show. Thank you to all of our patrons for continuing to support First Aid Spray. This is one of those episodes that's come quite quickly after the last one. So in terms of new content, last episode, I feel like I spoke for like 5 minutes about stuff we put out. So this is a little bit shorter by comparison. The latest episode of Now That's What I Call Survival Horror is up for Patreon members, where Sherwin picked his top 10 tracks from Resident Evil Remake, the 2002 Resident Evil title. Long-awaited, I think, entry in this series, and a great conversation indeed. So that's Patreon exclusive for Tyrants and Masterminds. Meanwhile, the latest Now That's What I Call Survival Horror episode to go over to SoundCloud is our Parasite Eve episode, so that should be on your feeds now if you haven't seen it. As always, the show comes much earlier to YouTube than it does on SoundCloud, but they are there if you want to listen to them after the fact. Speaking of which, the new episode of Tear Death Experience is now out on our YouTube, where we ranked the final boss themes from the mainline Resident Evil games. So it's been a very musical time for First Aid Spray recently, I guess. So yeah, go check that out. I think that's everything from us. So Steve, would you like to take us into the news?
Only one story this week. Resident Evil 2 is now the best-selling game in the series.
I love talking about this stuff. I like when we get to do this. Yes, we're talking, of course, individual entries. I think Resident Evil 5 still leads the pack in terms of multiple SKUs from all different platforms and that kind of stuff. But in terms of an individual release, Resident Evil 2 is now top of the Resident Evil pile with 12.6 million units, overtaking Resident Evil 7, which is now on 12.4. This puts Remake 2 as Capcom's third ever best-selling title underneath Monster Hunter World and Rise. And then following up behind Resi 7, we also have Resi 5, Resi 6, Resi Village as well. So we were all just sort of waiting on this. Not so much expecting it as waiting on it. Kelsey, I assume that's the case, right? It was just a matter of time.
Yeah, I have a feeling we even said on a previous episode that we think RE2 Remake is going to become number one soon. Like whether that was like last year or before, I don't know. So yeah, it's not surprising. Funnily enough, it's a game that I played last Sunday because I just had a hankering to play it, and I haven't really had that with any of the others. So it's got something. I love it. I don't have too much to say. Yeah, I'm just not surprised. It's it's an awesome game. It's funny because we also have now, I guess, the top two are the two different types of perspectives as well. So it's like Capcom are in a position where they're like, what do we do for the future? Which route do we want to stick with? But they're both incredibly popular. So yeah, I'm sure we'll get more third person Resident Evils as well as first person at this rate.
Yes, that's a very, very good point. And I think in terms of two games that you would like to see at the top, it is not only is it nice to see two new games, January 2017 and January 2019, but they're both, befitting of being this high up. And Resident Evil 2 Remake, more than 7. People, of course, love 7 and talk about 7, but people are still talking about Remake 2 4 years on now. It was a huge point in the franchise, and it's still very much looked back on positively. James, how do you feel about this update? A lack of surprise, I think, all around?
Yeah, it's great. I've often said, that like RE7 was basically was the flagship, but like that kind of restarted everything. But RE2 was the one that kind of got everybody really back in again. Yeah, like everybody came in after Remake 2, and yeah, it definitely deserves it. Like no matter the what the internet says, it deserves everything. That and it's shown just with the sale. That I apologize for all the noise behind me. Hang
on. Steve, how do you feel about this sales update?
Well, I have to say, I think RE-Verse and Exoprimal have got a bit of a climb to get to the top spot, because I don't think RE2 Remake's shifting anytime soon. If anything, maybe for Remake, maybe. I know it's not the top spot, Steve, but that's Monster Hunter, isn't it? But
You say that, but RE-Verse sold, in theory, 8.3 million units, because that's how much Village did.
No.
It was free with Village.
How much did Shadows of Rose sell? How much did Shadows of Rose sell? Because that's not Village, that's a DLC for Village.
But it came with Village. The DLC code was in the box of Village.
I cannot.
I'm just saying.
Yes, but how many people installed that?
I was going to say, this doesn't change the fact that there are 6 people playing it right now. But sorry, yes, do carry on.
No, I think it's great. It's honestly, at the time when all the awards was going around in 2019 and when RE2R got snubbed, I was livid. So the fact that this is now the 3rd best-selling Capcom title of all time, I would say it turns out it probably was actually more rated than people were giving it credit for at the time, and that's outside of Resident Evil circles. We will have to sit with bated breath as to what the newest entry will look like when it comes. Will it be a third person, or will it be a first person like my compatriots have just said? But I think, it was kind of like, I think the writing's been on the wall for a while, and I'm kind of happy it's landed.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Resident Evil, generally is in a bit of an odd spot right now, especially now that we've had Death Island. Aside from any anticipated Resident Evil 4 Remake DLC, after that, we actually have no idea what's to come next, whether it's a new game or a spin-off or another remake. So, yeah, you're right. It will be really interesting to see what sort of perspective it lands in and what kind of maybe informed it and that kind of stuff. But I think that does it for the news, which is handy because we get to cover a brand new release, speaking of which, in Resident Evil Death Island. And now, reading the file Officer's Diary from Resident Evil Village, Aaron O, who you can find on Casting Call Club at Mantanimi.
The King's Orders finally arrived. Withdraw. It is most vexing that we must abandon the border stronghold to those heretics. If I had but a little more time, I know I might be able to turn the tides of this battle. Nay, I should not put on airs. It is my curiosity that ties me to this place. There are a number of ruins in the vicinity which the locals say are very ancient. The ceremony site with 4 giant statues, the caves with murals carved on the walls, the stone plinth they call the Giant's Chalice. Where did the people who built them come from? Where did they go? It irks me that we must abandon this place without knowing.
It feels like we've been talking about this for ages, but the film was actually only first revealed in February of this year. But I suppose it feels like we've been talking about it for ages because the last few weeks we've all just been doing the collective sort of shrug of shoulders being like, well, where is it then? Because Capcom and Sony have not been overly clear on when this film is coming out. We talked about that over the last few podcasts with various different updates in the news about release dates, some playing in cinemas in certain parts of the world and coming to streaming here, there, and not other places. And we might as well start with that before we even get into the film, because I feel like we probably all got a little bit of frustration to get off of our chest. But when it comes to the UK, we were given one release date. That it was coming digitally, pre-order now, but nowhere actually had any option to pre-order. It was, listed on Amazon, for example, but you couldn't pre-order it up to the day of release. And the release day came and went, and nobody really knew what was going on. As of August the 1st, It is now streaming in the UK on various places, but the physical edition of the film, I believe, comes out later to the end of the month, and in other places in Europe, they're still waiting. For example, our friend Chaotic Claire in Germany is waiting until October, I think it is. This is, I'll let everyone else rip into it, quite frankly, insulting and ridiculous, is it not, James?
Sorry, yes, I'm here. Hello. Yeah, it is. It's so infuriating. It's because, if this was the first time, we'd be like, oh, okay, Capcom, okay, Sony, but this isn't. This is like the third time this has happened for big releases, and we just cannot give them any slack for this. Like and it's not just Resident Evil, by the way. Like, it's other stuff too, and we've done podcasts on it as well. Mortal Kombat, for instance, right? Yeah, you feel like you're second-hand fans, You feel like you don't actually matter, and and that might be the case, and that is, it's not fair on us as fans, like, to be constantly insulted like this every time, and we have to go out of our way, like, to find, we didn't even know it was online, it was streaming online until
just recently. Like, okay, Steve just found it, didn't you? Just randomly by looking on Xbox on August 1st. Oh, there it is.
Yeah. I divined it by using a farmyard animal's blood first. The usual rituals, the sense kind of thing.
And it's a.
Yeah, you're welcome, world.
It's also, let's forget about us for a second. Let's think about all the people that worked on it, right? And it's also an insult to them. They put so much work into doing this media, this content. Right, and they're undermined because of silly licensing or silly releases. Like, it'll be something silly like that. Something that is inconsequential. And I just, everybody but Sony or whoever is in charge of all this. I feel sorry for everybody, and we should be constantly tweeting at them and atting them to say this is not good enough.
Yeah, I'm going to have to say, personally speaking, I believe Sony is more to blame for this than others, as you've said, because we had the same issue with Mortal Kombat, and they are the distributor for the film. So I think it lays on their head. And it's a weird one because I suppose the argument is, do they feel like it's worth them putting a certain amount of effort into to give it a launch around the world at the same time and whatever, and get everything sorted, or are they just kind of dragging their feet with it because they feel like, well, we're not going to get that much money for it anyway? But here's the thing, Sony, we live in 2023. You're probably going to get less money now than you would have done. It's gone down every moment you waste not making it available. The shut up and take my money meme at this point, it's speak up and let me give you my money. Like, that's the problem, isn't it? People want to pay to own copies of this film physically or pay for a rental to stream it. And if you don't provide it, and as we said this with the Mortal Kombat film, people will find elsewhere. That's just how it works. We live in 2023 now. It's not that hard. Kelsey, I was going to say, where do you fall down in this? But I'm pretty sure we're all feeling pretty burned by this.
Yes, stop having a go at Sony, everyone. Come on now. You just hit the nail on the head. It feels like we're back in the 90s, and I completely get that there's like 1,000 logistical things out there to sort out when releasing a movie worldwide, but this stuff doesn't happen with Spider-Man, doesn't happen with Ghostbusters. It shows that Sony are prioritizing its products, and like you said, yes, it's a smaller audience for this movie than something like Ghostbusters, and it's made in Japan, and Sony probably think, well, the value of the UK and the EU markets for this film, it's not worth our effort, and they think, let's just kind of cut our losses, really. And that's to us that feels silly because we're the Resident Evil fans and we're the ones getting screwed over, but Sony are just looking at the numbers at the end of the day, so they think that they just think it's not worth our time and money or effort to make a global release, even though in 2023 it's a million times easier than it was in the 90s. So as far as I'm concerned, there's no excuse, and I really dislike it. It is insulting. I think if Sony took things like this more seriously, then who knows, maybe we'd end up with better things all round. And it's weird because also, I don't know if anybody else saw, they clearly went out of their way for this to send the cast on like a promo tour, and the voice actors have been... I must have seen like over 10 different interviews and loads of videos on YouTube where they've been promoting this movie specifically together as a voice cast. So Sony have put the effort in there, but then completely ballsed it up and not given anyone in the UK and the EU access to the movie. So it's counterproductive and makes no sense. And if this was maybe cared for a little bit more and it was in the cinema in the UK, maybe it would have been a bit more of an event and there would have been hype online. Everyone would have been excited and everybody wins. But yeah, it's just really depressing, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, it's odd because, as you say, like they did some amount of marketing for it, but they've also been incredibly vague when it comes to our market specifically. Like they put a lot of effort in one place and not a lot of effort elsewhere. And I think the real problem, what's really hurt us as sort of a community in the Discord server, we talked about it, is just a complete lack of communication about what's going on. We were just in the dark. We didn't know when it was coming, where it was coming, what the situation was. You know, was that maybe the worst thing, Steve?
100%. You know, I feel like I can't really go over the same points we've already gone over enough times, but can we just like put a few pennies in the swear jar, because it is like absolutely atrocious. That I'm pretty sure it releases one side of the world, and only then do certain parts of the world, like for example Germany, find out that they're not getting the film until October. Like that to me says, these get it physically. You have to wait half a year or a third of a year. There is. I don't know. The chat's saying, is it a licensing issue? I mean, possibly, but I feel like no licensing issue should be 3 months past release.
No, it's laziness. It's what it is. They've sorted it out.
It boggles my mind because like Netflix distributed like Infinite Darkness globally the same day. Surely a similar process can be done. I'm pretty sure at some point it will probably end up on Netflix because the other Resident Evil CGI films did. Mind-boggling, frustrating. I don't want to go over what everyone else is saying. So yeah, it's stupid, and they should really, really sort it out because they'll do less legitimate and honourable means to purchase it, and then everyone loses out on money. All the people who made the film, all the people who acted in the film, all the people who promoted the film. It's stupid.
Yes, indeed. I think we've probably gone over that point enough. Everyone probably tuned in to hear us talk about the film, but we absolutely need to talk about that ahead of it anyway. So, right, that out of the way, let's talk about our experiences with Death Island. This, of course, is the follow-up to Resident Evil Vendetta, in a sense. It's a bit of a soft sequel, but a sequel nonetheless. And lots of hype going into this, of course, because this is the film with the return of Jill Valentine, and also in the later stages of the marketing, it's Resident Evil Avengers. You know, essentially, like pretty much every major player is here, with a few exceptions. So there was a certain degree of interest going into this, even though we probably all should have been a little bit on the back foot because Infinite Darkness was terrible. So let's talk about the story of Death Island. Maybe let's not race to the end. Talk more about the setup and that kind of stuff and how we felt, leading into going to Alcatraz prison, as our characters are drawn together for a few different reasons. But, essentially, oh no, new bioterrorism alert. Steve, how did you feel about the setup to Death Island?
I thought it was kind of cute. Like, going in, I was expecting Avengers like mini vignettes with all the characters doing various things leading in. And we even get stuff with the villain. We get, like, emphasis on their backstory. And then we smash cut to Leon basically doing the Matrix car chase from Reloaded. Yep. And then Claire checks out an orca, and Jill then finally gets a reintroduction to the quote-unquote semi-present day. It's still 8 years previous. Flashlight abusing some poor home and shooting a zombie. It was actually kind of neat. I'm surprised that of all the characters to get like their own intro vignette, Chris is just, "Hi, I'm Chris, I'm here." Like,
Everyone knows who he is.
Yeah. That was surprising. I feel like this a little bit caught for the horse. I feel like poor Chris got a bit of the stick there. It was like... But yeah, no, I generally enjoyed it, and it did, like, I do feel like at some point someone did watch the first Avengers film for, like, almost a treatment plan, at least initially, because that's how it all feels, like establishing this, don't spend too long like going, here's the true lore of everything and all the big reveals. And we even get Umbrella soldiers in Raccoon City for the millionth time.
Yes, indeed. James, how did you feel about the opening to Death Island? And as Steve was probably correctly said, the sort of Avengers intro for everyone. Sort of, here's where they are at the moment.
Yeah, they definitely took some pointers from Avengers. Even the music. If you listen to the music of this movie, it's just, it's the same, but they do little dips. You could literally just put it over the Avengers theme and it'd be the same. In terms of the story, I as a summary, and I'll talk about it later on, but I wasn't impressed with it. But I wasn't particularly. I didn't have high expectations from it because it's a CGI Resi film. It started great. I thought it was nice seeing the Raccoon City incident again, but they did it they framed it really well.
Agreed.
Yeah, and it was really exciting. In fact, in my notes, I put "Holy expletive, this is good." Because it was awesome to see feet on the ground, and see real, because the acting was pretty good there too. It was a really great way to start the movie. I felt, as a summary, and again, I'll go into details later, but as the film went on, it kind of deteriorated a bit, which kind of sucked. But I did enjoy the first half of the movie at least.
Yeah, that opening scene with who we come to know is Dylan was really strong for me as well. We kind of joke about how Raccoon City has gone from the 4th survivor to the 20-something survivor at this point, because they just keep popping up. But as you say, the framing is the perfect way to put it. It was just so good on this. Even though, yes, I was a little bit confused that Umbrella have another private army, because he's not USS, even though he kind of looks like it.
I mean,
and he's not UBCS.
He's wearing full black body armor with Umbrella logos and being told to keep protect corporate interests and anyone else dies. It's not like at any point going, are we the baddies? Because
right.
He's a very different cut of cloth from the standard Umbrella stock, I feel.
Yeah. It's interesting, but it was funny because we covered Outbreak recently, and there was a little scene in that where they showed them sort of setting up the police barricade, and then it was really cool to kind of see it again here, and it almost it gives you those kind of vibes of here's a little separate story that took place in the big explosion of grief that was Raccoon City. So those are always really nice to see, and all the little fine details if they are USS guys, if they're not USS guys, they don't have the right logo and they don't have the masks. That's basically it. Because they have the MP5, so I thought that was really cool. That they have, the guns that they should have if they're in the squad and stuff. The bike scene was a little bit nonsense to me, but fine. It's Leon, you kind of expect that. And it really did kind of hammer home this is a Vendetta sequel. Claire doing a Revelations 1 was fine by me. William Gunner, the man on the beach who jumps when seagulls fly away. Just thought that was a bit odd. He's a marine life or wildlife expert who got freaked out by flying birds. And Jill, what an opening scene for Jill to come back in, skulking around the dark. I love the bit where she pushes herself off the wall with a zombie to force it down to the floor below, and then we see that bit where she shoots through the table, which we saw in the trailers. just a really strong intro. Kelsey, how did you feel about the opening to Death Island?
Yeah, it was awesome. I think I love when new perspectives are given to stories that we already know, which is what the intro is. Telling the story of this soldier who was there in 1998 and how those events have affected him, I think, and the butterfly effect that caused, and leads us to the events of this movie. It broadens the scope of the universe, and I think it just adds depth. And I kind of like James said, I was like, oh, this is really good. I sat up and, with my expectations on the floor, I sat up and took notice straight away. I thought the opening was tonally superb. So the concept of the story at the core of the movie, I think was pretty decent. And I like self-contained movies that take place in one location. I think that keeps it grounded and immersive. There's no sort of crazy globe-trotting from China in 6 hours, and I think the choice of Alcatraz is cool. It's iconic. I think as the viewer, you know where you are and what you're dealing with. And yeah, we'll talk more about characters in a bit, but I just think the film went out of its way in the setup to kind of give a reason for everyone being where they are. Yeah. And I think it very neatly brought them all together to Alcatraz in a way that didn't feel kind of far-fetched or pointless. And yeah, it gave them all something very specific to do. So I was pleased with that. I do have some other issues. I mean, I don't know what else we want to cover. I think, like you, Si, I really loved that Jill intro. I thought that was really strong. It's funny, Steve, because yeah, like Chris's, I was seeing them all get their intro, and as ridiculous as Leon's one, Chris's was, his intro was appearing in Jill's intro at the very end, which it did make.
It's
me
about
laugh.
time, to be honest.
Yes. The scene with them all getting coffee kind of made me laugh, and it was like they were talking. Oh, it's like another day at the office, and they were all talking about work. I thought was good, and yeah, I found myself in these kind of first 20 minutes or so really enjoying it in the introduction of the characters. The Leon introduction was dumb, and yeah, he's Tom Cruise within like 1 minute of appearing, and it's just like yeah, okay, same old Leon. Yeah. But yeah, as a setup, I thought it was strong. I thought that the flashback setup with Dylan was really, really good, and the introduction of the heroes was broadly really strong. Yeah, as far as the opening of the film goes anyway.
Yeah, I think I absolutely agree. And now, it's worth saying in case, I mean, I imagine everyone who's listening to this have watched the film. It'd be a bit silly if not to, but for what it's worth, Leon's looking for the missing Dr. Taylor, and Claire sort of identifies a bitten whale, and there are reports coming from Rebecca that there have been infections around the general area from people who their bites are not spreading infection. So where did their infection come from? And everything they've had, the one thing all these people have in common is that they're at Alcatraz, which we kind of knew that from the trailer. It's not any more complicated than the trailer made it seem. So as you say, the large sort of group of them do go there. Rebecca stays home to be the girl in the chair, and then they bump into Leon along the way, which I also appreciate that they didn't just send everyone in one big sort of group. They actually were like, right, here's a core thing, and then we're going to actually sort of like drop the other characters in as we go. I thought it was really, really good. And to your point, Kelsey, as well, the single location thing, I hadn't necessarily considered it, but you're absolutely right. It was good just being like, right, the story takes place here. That's it. Done. Like now we can go. And they wasted I felt like they wasted as little time as possible to get rolling with it, while also addressing some of the themes that were coming up throughout the rest of the film, because we see that flashback with Dylan. This is going to be something that gets addressed over the course of the film, which I thought was really, really clever, that they kept going back to his villain origin story, and they set up a little bit of like, Jill's still pretty messed up, and Chris's intro, in fact, is not him being boulder punching Chris. It's him being, I think you should step back from action for a little while, Chris, trying to be sort of like the caring guardian of them all. So I feel like it's slotted together really well. And as you say, we'll talk about it more when we get to characters. But yeah, let's start getting into the guts of the story then, I guess. Steve, how did you feel about Death Island as it trucked along? We got to the prison. Mayhem begins. Feel free to go.
Honestly, as much as I was enjoying the action set pieces, a lot of it seemed to just be like, and then this happens. And then this happens. And the whole way that the group gets separated, Jill just basically sees some dude break randomly a bit of the floor breaks, and she thinks, I want to see what's going on.
Yeah.
I'm going to go for a dive. Doesn't mention anything, just alley-oop. Bit of a unique way to break up the cast. And she enters the sewers of meeting other cast members, because that's where they all do it. It was honestly weirdly contrived, but acceptable. If you could turn your brain off and enjoy it as a ensemble cast action movie, but the depths of it like in the middle we have a big zombie fight, then they encounter lickers, and then Leon meets Jill, and then the big villain does his monologue speeches and stuff. It's a little bit like trying to shoehorn action pieces and then a story thread behind it that's not all that deep. I unfortunately, I haven't seen The Rock and I haven't been to Alcatraz, so I don't know if they're trying to riff on that film. So I'm a little bit lost here. But personally, I felt like at times we were just jumping back and forth with not really much plot progression. until people get stabbed by the MacGuffin of the week.
I don't disagree with that, to be fair, when you say I hadn't really considered it, but I guess my sort of forgiveness for it comes from the fact that it all does kind of just move along at a good enough pace that I wasn't really worried about it.
I'm not saying I didn't enjoy the
sequence,
characters talking and interacting, and Chris had as much as I normally go, oh, Chris is going to be generic, he had this moment of standing on a railing and helping a lady and also shooting Jesus. Way to accentuate how muscly the man is, which is actually kind of fun. I liked it.
Yeah.
Jill's doing combat knife WWE moves, and Claire's being a Resident Evil protagonist in comparison to everybody else and helping people. If you look at each character individually, that's kind of cool. Leon's actually RE4 Leon, I feel. Like, he's somewhere between every other version, but mostly the original RE4 Leon, just a bit more mature. If that makes any sense. I feel the quips and silliness. I feel like Matt Mercer's doing the best he can of basically doing what Paul Mercier did back in the day. Just less camp.
Yeah, I've definitely got some things to say about Liam when we get there, but we're talking about sort of that action sequence, spot on. I love the fact they had Claire sort of helping other people, and I was so worried because they get her in a cell. She's putting a table up against the door because there's zombies banging on it, and she realizes that, oh no, she's trapped in there with the zombies because of the way that we find out that it's quote unquote spreads. We didn't see a resolution to that, which is a shame, but I'm also very glad that she didn't get saved by someone. I was like, right, she's surrounded by zombies. Inevitably now Leon's going to turn up or whatever. Do you know what? I'm happy that we didn't get a resolution. She just got out and we just didn't see it because she's cool like that. She can do things. We don't have to see them all. For me, it was fine. It moved along good enough speed, as I say, that I wasn't overly bothered by some of that kind of stuff. But you're right, it wasn't super deep at this point. It was just we're in a prison and there's zombies and now there's Zickers, oh no. But it's not a lengthy film, so it never I was just constantly entertained by the crazy goings on. James, how did you feel about sort of the mid? Let's talk about the middle of the film.
I'm going to attack your comment about the Claire in the room thing. I thought that was really badly done. I was so I was like, oh sweet, we're going to see how Claire gets, because that's what this movie is. We're putting you up against an impossible odd. Now we want to see you get out of that impossible odd. What are you going to do? And we didn't get to see that. And it was Claire, who we don't get to see to do much, In the last thing, in Infinite Darkness, she was going to
Lamp.
She was going to Leon. For everything she needed. In this one, I wanted to see her do something. Other than, I was very disappointed by that scene, right? Because it was also set up like there was going to be something else after it, right? Because it was doing that pacey thing where it was going really fast. There were 20, 30 second scenes between the characters that they were trying to fight off everything. And I really, really wanted to see how she got by that. But the next scene we get with her, she's okay. And it annoyed me so much. When it comes to kind of the other everyone else, it was great when Leon and Jill met up. I think that was probably my favorite part. I did not enjoy the very Rule 34 liquor section that I put down in notes. It felt very weird. It was clearly inspired by something that someone had seen on the internet. But other than that, around that, I really enjoyed all the action scenes there, especially with Leon I was trying to look at Leon in this as the Leon that I know of him as in the CGI movies rather than the Leon in the video games, and it was the way he was acting was very Leon in the CGI movies, and it was cool when he when he was counting his bullets and he threw he exploded what did he explode? I can't remember now.
It's a
gas tank.
Yeah,
it's the Resident Evil world. Red tankies with explosion. And
the back and forward between those two was great. It was just complete cold openers and closes between both of them. While they're trying to, it was very fun to listen to them both during that scene. And I did like Chris in this, because I didn't get to see Chris do much, and that is always going to be a positive for me because we get to see Chris do too much. But the things he did do were pretty impactful. Like you mentioned, Si, the dragging up of the person and then doing a really wild move, where he was picking her up and at the same time shooting under himself to shoot another zombie, and then it was cool to look at. It was like very actiony, and I liked it, but it didn't. Yeah, there was what I put down as stupid people moments. One of those, there was things that didn't need to happen, but they did because they were for the action of it all. And another thing, it was great seeing Chris and Claire together.
Yes, especially.
Yeah, because we've not seen that often at all, really, as well.
Yeah.
And it was so good seeing them. I would have liked a little bit more conversation between them both. Because what I was getting was, we've been chilling out, for years.
Right.
We're old hats now, right? But we don't know that as a viewer.
Yeah.
So I would have loved a little bit more on that. If we're talking about the mid, that was pretty much a very large part of the mid, and then we'll get into kind of the start of the end game,
Right.
which was when the infection started happening, and the monsters and
yeah,
stuff.
for sure.
But yeah, it was fine, but there were just there were stupid people parts, and I don't like that.
Fair. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, we expected this because it's the first time all these characters have been a thing together. But there are so many cool pairings that you get to see for the first time that, as you say, are not. They're kind of written as if they're not the first time because, and that's very deliberate. Clearly, it's like, this can't be the first time Jill and Leo have met each other, so we're just going to pretend that they haven't, and it's fine, and it works. And you're right, I would have loved some more conversation from everyone, but that's just the pace of the film. But it was really nice to see Jill and Claire interact for the first time, and Rebecca interact with other characters that aren't Chris. And even Chris and Claire, who have interacted before, but just to see that again, and also just to see them, because the last time, I guess, that I can think of was Code Veronica, and that's a very different situation where Chris comes in to save Claire and gets her at her most vulnerable moment, whereas this point, they just seem completely on the level. They know what each other is capable of, and they don't sort of get in each other's way, and I really like that. Like, they both have a moment where they fight zombies off together, and they're both doing their own thing. And whilst I completely see your point earlier about sort of not resolving the Claire moment and giving her a badass thing, she did get her own badass moments later by just being Claire and looking after people and saving this guy that just called her a terrorist, which is one of the many great little nods and throwbacks this film has, mentioning something like Harvardville. I popped for that. I didn't expect a degeneration reference. Okay, cool. And then Piers getting a name drop, which is a little odd because it sounds like Chris is telling the story of Piers for the first time, and it's like 3 years after he died. So I'm like, that seems a little odd, but you know what? You do you, my friend. If that's traumatic to you and you haven't told Jill about it, okay. It's a little unbelievable to me, but fine, whatever. Sure. Stuff like that was really cool. Even Dr. Taylor's fake name, it's something Tony Davis, which felt to me like a reference to Senator Ron Davis from Degeneration. I might just be making that up.
Yeah, I felt that too.
I thought so, especially since he mentioned Harvardville as well. I was like, that seems like it was deliberate. So that whole little section with the three of them really stood out to me, as did, as you said, James, the liquor section. Not for the parts that you mentioned, the negative bits, which I do get, but also I thought the liquors in this were not just really cool to look at, but they did lickery things which you don't always get to see, like the way they grabbed Jill by the ankle and pulled back to try and get her, and meanwhile Leon's gun arm gets caught by another tongue and they're getting restrained a bit. I was like, cool, we don't necessarily get enough of that kind of stuff, I feel like. But yeah, the middle for me was quite exciting. It's definitely got some negatives to it, but I was having a good time. Kelsey, how did you feel like the middle of the film went?
Yes, I think I sort of largely agree with you, Si. I mean, I've got some specific things to talk about for Claire and the liquors and stuff, which I'm going to save until characters and BOWs. But I was having a lot of fun with this film. The set pieces we've kind of talked about and mentioned, and yeah, I was surprised at how much fun I was having. And then, kind of different to you, Si, I think my issue was the pacing was then too fast. I think it just started to rush through things a bit too quickly because I was seeing all this potential, and then it kind of had a similar issue to our beloved Welcome to Raccoon City. And that's the thing is, when you have an ensemble cast, you will inevitably, with a runtime like this, end up not dedicating as much time to characters and story threads that I think would be, needed to have the best impact. So with that in mind, I think this movie and the story it was trying to tell maybe could have done with like another 40 minutes. I mean, maybe some lengthier character intros, some more. You mentioned the flashbacks to show Dylan's journey. Like, they were some of the best parts of the film.
Yeah.
We could have had maybe a bit more of that, and to show the journey of how he got from there to this, this fateful day here at Alcatraz. So, and in his dealings with Antonio as well. So, it just kind of it. Steve said as well, it just jumped from one thing to the next, and it dumped the bits of plot in there, and you didn't really have time to latch onto it. But I thought what it was trying to tell was quite interesting, and it does slow down a couple of times, mainly with Jill. I think those scenes are all excellent, and the scene with Jill and Chris talking to each other, with Jill and Leon in the sewers, with Jill's intro, like so much of Jill is the best, and then even leading towards the ending as well. But yeah, with a 90-minute runtime, I just think the story was never reaching the depths that I think it had that potential for. And so, I'm not saying that like 90 minutes isn't, a bad thing. It's nice to have this easily digestible film. But in this case, we have the 5 heroes and 1 villain, and I think, the balance is a little bit off. And I started to feel that as I got past the middle of the movie. I was like, right, we're rushing here. I would have quite liked to slow down. I felt like the ending was on the way before it should have been. So, yeah, and, people have kind of jokingly called this Resident Evil's Avengers, which, honestly, is not a bad idea. And I think possibly a couple of movies with everyone finally coming together to take down this big new villain in Dylan could have been really good.
That is kind of, not to put the cart before the horse, but I would have really have liked this event to end it on a cliffhanger, and then we have like a third one with Vendetta being one, and this 2, and then 3 would have been great. Yeah,
and I think we could have done that. So, yeah, despite the fun I was having, it felt like when I was watching this and it was going kind of past the midpoint of the film, it felt like I was watching maybe like the finale to a TV series where we haven't seen like the previous 8 episodes, because they had all come together and the big action was happening, whereas all that build-up of what these characters were doing with their lives and how they've been brought together as pawns and stuff was just kind of rushed through a bit. So, but that, it sounds like I'm being overly critical. I was still kind of having fun as I was watching it. I think as I was watching it, halfway through, I was like, this is easily probably the best of the CG movies. It's certainly in the top 2 of them. So yeah, we're still having fun as we approach the ending. It was just breezing through, and I would have liked for it to take its time a little bit more.
When you talk about the runtime as well, it's made me think, just could we have swapped the runtime around from this and Infinite Darkness, which did nothing for most of its runtime, it's just utter stupid, which was at least 2 hours long, I believe, because it's like 4 episodes of 25 minutes apiece or whatever. This could have. You're absolutely right in that case. Like, it seems odd that got more time and this did not nearly get enough. Like, I can absolutely take that criticism. Let's sort of move towards the sort of final act then, I guess, as we see Dylan's backstory unfold, and how he was forced to kill his friend and teammate, which went very wrong very quickly. Both of them grabbing for different guns that may not have been empty. Dylan gets shot in the leg, and then suddenly he has to beat his partner in order to survive and get evac'd from Raccoon City. He has to beat his partner to death with, I don't know what that was, a filing cabinet drawer or something big and heavy and metal and all that stuff. And his grand scheme of using little bio drones with a adapted T-virus in it to inject, just the population, send them out across the world and wipe the slate clean, as most Resident Evil villains tend to do. We'll obviously talk more about him as a character, but I suppose it was just important to give that setup for this point in the story where everyone gets infected, and then they work through it and they battle him. So I guess that's our sort of third act to talk about. Actually, Kelsey, let's start with you. How did you feel about the concluding chapter of this 90-minute movie?
Yeah, I suppose Dylan's fate I wasn't crazy of. This idea of like his plan, of releasing the drones. It's like, yeah, a little bit contrived, but I didn't hate it. And I thought, it could be quite devastating, releasing, because what's going to stop these little drones? You don't see them coming. I thought the way that they were depicted in the movie was quite good, where, people were basically going down and dropping, but they weren't being bitten. And it was like, oh, okay, little mosquito drones and stuff. It's, it's kind of sci-fi ridiculousness, but or maybe not, but it was kind of cool. But he was kind of, I didn't really get his thing with the Russian roulette stuff that he was doing, and he started to, lose it a bit in a way that made me be less kind of empathetic towards him, because that flashback stuff was really good, and it was like, I feel for this guy. He kind of has a point, and when he did his big, speech where he was saying how, they all think that they're doing good when really they're just as bad, like working.
They're serving corporations. There you go.
I was like, he's right. He's right, man. And he was calling them out. So I enjoyed that. But then again, it was rushing through, and I didn't like. He just did the same thing that so many of them do, where he's just like, what did he do? He basically shot himself and infused himself with a BOW. It's like, why do this? Like, this is what everyone does all the time. They inject themselves, and I've seen it all before, so it got into kind of familiar territory, which I didn't really enjoy. The stuff with, is it Maria? Have I got her name right? Yes. Although, like, the fight I thought was kind of fun to watch with Leon. Again, I just felt it was maybe... And she had a reason to be there, to be fair. Again, they tried to... I like that they did try to interweave this with the wider universe. And, she wasn't just some random character. So that was fine. But, it was kind of just over and done with really quickly. I don't know. I just would have liked to see more. I don't even know if she had any dialogue in the film. I can't even...
I think she said remember. 2 or 3 lines. She definitely said a couple of things, but it wasn't much.
Yeah. So... I could feel it rushing towards the ending. I thought the set piece, with them all with the weapons, was mostly awesome. But did anybody catch the bit where I think Chris kicks a case to Jill, who's firing at the monster with a machine gun, and she opens the case and then starts firing at it with a shotgun from a distance? And I'm not usually one of these people
that's question that.
Yeah, you wouldn't I don't say, you wouldn't use that gun for that situation, but it was just completely wrong, and it made me laugh out loud. I was like, a shotgun is not a ranged weapon. What are you doing? This doesn't help you. So I thought that was kind of silly. But Chris with the classic rocket launcher looked awesome. Bringing in the the Resident Evil 3 style plasma rifle. It was there was loads happening, which I did really enjoy. I just felt that Dylan's stuff was wasted. Like, it was fun seeing all the heroes do the stuff that they did. And I liked his little drone plan thing. But I was just kind of a bit sort of, same old thing. It's another villain wasted, another villain killed off, and a bit of a shame, really. So, not too much else to say. It was just, it got there too quickly. I would have loved to have seen more with some of these characters.
Yeah, it's absolutely, the last part of the film for me is like a complete... There's stuff about it I loved, and there's stuff about it I was just like, this is so stupid. Like, eye candy wise, it's great, as you say, and the final fight was just a joyful little Resident Evil romp of nonsense where Leon crashes like 2 or 3 different vehicles during one boss fight. I was like, you know what you're doing there, and everyone gets sort of a classic weapon that they've used before and stuff like that. It was like, that was really neat and really clever, and it follows on from a bunch of the references. But yes, there was a load of stuff. It's like, this is just nonsense now. Like, Dylan goes from basically having the best idea, essentially, with these drones and stuff. He can't, as you say, they're indetectable. He almost can't be stopped, and yet he drags them all here for them to stop him. Like, there's no reason for him to do this except to show off. And then he infects them, and they all sort of approach him. One of them said, I think it might be Jill, says to him, Rebecca got us the cure. We're all okay now. And he's like, I knew that was going to happen. And it's like, okay, why did you do that? And then he say,
dumbass.
And then he just kills himself. And you're like, it was really weird. But at least before that though, I got a genuine laugh out loud moment from Dylan calling out Chris and all of his dead teammates. I thought that was brilliant. Yeah. It's like, because we all make fun of all the people that Chris has indirectly, gotten killed and all the teams that he's burned through over the years. But the fact that, again, they knowingly made that reference just was like, that's for me, that is. I appreciate stuff like that. And again, as you say, like them calling out the corporations and stuff, I thought was particularly funny. Particularly that they said about Leon and the government. I know now's not the time, but Dylan sort of going on about the DSO. I feel like Chris and Claire would have piped up and be like, he's right, by the way. Because they both have gone like, oh yeah, the US government, they might be the biggest villain in the series. But I guess we don't have time to address that in the middle of a CGI movie. So I thought that was particularly funny. There's loads of little bits to talk about in the finale. But James, you just interjected, so I'm going to let you go. How did you feel about the final sort of part of Death Island?
So I consider the part where he starts his dumb monologue, like as the beginning of the end game, and it was that monologue that completely took me out of the film. Like, he was standing there talking for like 6 minutes.
I also want to point out, sorry just to interrupt, but like the scene we saw earlier where the random just people in the prison get infected and then immediately get back up. Yeah, he's talking for like 6 minutes, and just the core cast of just the plot armor is just doing them a solid, I guess.
Yeah,
because they're just like, yeah, okay,
later.
for like 20 minutes.
It was so infuriating. Because the most infuriating thing about it, was because, and I waited till now to say this, because at the beginning of the movie, Jill makes it quite clear that she is all guns blazing. Like, she is not going to let this happen again. Like, she's been through too much. She's basically in her emo phase. Like, she is going to go off at anyone, like, who tries to do this again. Like, who tries to settle their own score. She will settle her score. Like, this is her dark arc. She stands there for over 6 minutes listening to this guy. Like, without a gun pointed at her. Like, there's a girl over there, right? But there's no gun pointed at her. Dylan's sitting there on a banister, just with his elbow on the frickin' banister. We know Jill is a crack shot. She's got a... I really dislike that. Never mind, like, Resident Evil. I dislike that kind of stuff in anything. Because it's like... Now it's too exposition. Like, you're doing this purely for the exposition, right? And I was actually... Same as you, Kels, right? I was actually kind of feeling towards Dylan before this moment, right? Yeah. And as soon as he went on his stupid little diatribe about, I can't even remember. He spoke for 6 minutes and I can't remember a single word, right? Because
wipe the slate clean was his big thing, wasn't it? Yeah.
And it's like, just shut up, Jill, shoot him. As I was watching this, Jill, just shoot him, right? Why are you not shooting him? Yeah, and I, like, again on my notes, when he says, I expected she would about Rebecca coming. No, you didn't. You didn't expect that was going to happen. And the Russian roulette thing, right? Like, hang on, this guy's been playing Russian roulette the entire time, throughout this entire film, potentially dying because he has survivor's guilt, right? But then he makes out it was all part of his plan. And then he injects himself. Mm-hmm. It makes no sense.
There's so many things like that at this point in the film. Like, the drones are overloading the beast with the virus. That's funny because he seemed fine when he was ingesting it. Dylan's body was full of it because he injected himself before he chucked himself in. And it was fine before. So why now is it doing like just stuff like that? It's just like, what?
Yeah, it was not well thought out and it was really silly. And again, like, I was in the film at that point. It had, like, negatives. But as soon as that happened, I was completely taken out. I could not get... Like, I want to speak prior before that, because before that I was actually making constructive points in my notes, right? This is the first time... Is this the first time? Like, everybody's been infected now in the series, right? The main lines? Everybody technically now has been infected by something?
I think so, yeah. I can't... we never have we ever had anything specific about Chris? Because I know we've had everyone else had to get some kind of vaccine or whatever, but I can't think of the example where Chris was infected with something. But I'm sure at this point he must have been.
Yeah, yeah, I guess. I mean, on screen, I thought, so we've Jill's been infected. We know Jill's been infected. Claire's been infected. Rebecca, right? But Leon and Chris, when I had a look,
Leon got the Plagas.
oh, he did, yeah. So it was only Chris then.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So
Yeah, that I can think of. But
yeah, but yeah, and then like we kind of get into the final act, which is him turning the thing he turns into was dope. Like it was really gross and cool, right? And I liked it because it, as usual, Resident Evil, they try and the final monsters are always so grotesque, but you want to recognize some things, like. I know like some people might think it was silly, but the elephant feet he has, like it was silly, but I really liked it. Like it was threatening and like it was, but that I think other than maybe the Ouroboros was probably the most, and Resi 7 was probably the most chaotic we've ever seen, like a transformation. Like, and it was super cool to see. I want to bring at least one positive in it. Because the action scenes, when it... Like you were saying, I think, Sai, you were saying earlier, Ron and Kels, I think. The action scenes got to this point where there was so much happening and they were going so fast. I couldn't keep up. I couldn't keep up with what was happening. CGI in this film is really good. And we'll talk about more about that later. But, yeah, they were doing the shaky cam thing a little bit too much. And I couldn't keep up with the actions that were being done. I know that things happened. I would see a blur and then one person would be down, another person would be standing up, or they'd both be down. And it was, there were some cuts that were also weird. Like when, clear fan service, but I loved it when Jill picks up the plasma rifle, but then there's a sudden cut immediately after the shot. So you don't actually get to see the conclusion of her blowing this thing apart. You just get to see the cut, and then there's the hole. I wanted to see the whole scene of you blowing a hole into this thing. I didn't want to see any cuts, but they were just, they were like Liam Neeson in whatever that movie was, where I remember there was a criticism of that Taken, right, where it took 9 takes for him, but 9 cuts, 9 frames for him to jump over a fence.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I remember that so clearly. And while I was watching this, that's what it felt like. Every scene was just like they were doing way too many frames, way too many things, like cuts, like during that scene. And it was ridiculous. Yeah. Unfortunately, overall story, it was really good at the beginning. Like, and it had me in the middle, but that monologue just completely took me out, and then it just got really silly.
Fair enough. In terms of the plasma rifle, I have to say that, I'm going to just, again, caveat this, but I actually really like the way the end of this film ends. I had a really good time with the final fight, but there's loads of stuff that I'm like, this is nonsense. There's the underground of this prison, because it used to be a military base, and it has a big rail gun in it, apparently. It's like, when was this a military base? Like a week ago? What are we talking about here? It's like futuristic sci-fi weapons. And it's essentially the finger from Remake 3, which, I don't know, like the Chicago typewriter and stuff like that is okay. This felt a little bit lazy to me. We're just doing this again. And it might just be because in the instance of Jill, not only she's wearing the same thing, which we will get to when we talk to characters, but we've only just seen her in Remake 3, and you're just doing the same thing again. It's like, come on, have her do a crazy flipping kick thing or something from RE5 or something like that. It was just a little bit like, oh yeah, we just saw this a couple of years ago, but cool, thanks, I guess. And the fact that she's like, oh no, and it has to recharge. It's like, well, you've done this before. Like, that's how it works. Regardless, I'm really happy that they actually made Jill, at this point especially, like she's the main character of the whole thing. And I'm really glad that she gets to have all like that, the final sort of blows in it, and it does sort of like come to a point where it's, I'm taunting the villain, but it's a lesson that I need to learn myself. That old chestnut was really important for me that they did that. But Steve, how did you find the end of Death Island?
Messy. I think we've already touched on how messy it is. But yeah, Dylan starts with like an interesting monologue talking about how the corporation's doing this, that, and the other, and then just faintly I can hear a ring in the ears. It's like James Marcus saying, and the world will burn, and an inferno have wiped the slate clean. It's a shame. I'm gonna just like throw out the BSAA probably have like some convenient Deus Ex Machina vaccine booster, and that's why the protagonist lasted a little bit longer. But
Right,
no,
of course.
the second we get to the final battle, my heart sank because Dylan puts down his revolver and picks up the injector gun. Like, oh, we know where this is going. You're going to become a giant beastie, and then they're going to beat you, and that's it. But I was actually more disappointed about the fact that the action's just all over the place. Like, I feel like someone storyboarded some cool ideas and not actually thought how these are going to go together. Because, they just randomly have weapons, they randomly do things. And then Leon and Chris pick up a rocket launcher, and rather than fire at the beastie, they shoot a gate. They spend 3 minutes getting a rocket launcher together, shoot a gate. Jill blows up the beast with a grenade while she's in said water, so it should technically jib her since she's like in the same blast radius. That drew me out a bit. Rebecca and Claire's moment there was cool. I love their like, what are you doing? And then high five at the end, like, yeah, you guys need more screen time together because you've kind of been sidelined the whole film, which is a shame. The only thing about the monster that I noticed was his tail's whipping or he's sighing at them. It's just doing not sigh as in our podcast house, as in the actual the term sigh. It's just gasping for air at them. I did appreciate the visual tone thing it was going for because it's got a wrecked, malformed leg and it got the giant stamping hoof to kind of emblemise like Dylan's cane. At least that's what I think they were going for, really. Dylan's cane and busted leg represented in this monster. But it was just a blob thing that they then find a gun that I'm thinking was probably one of the whole, like, their tech-based stuff. Because, I mean, they've got all of Arius's and the Licker bio-drones and things underneath already. It's probably, they brought it in, if I'm honest. Yeah. I feel they had it. But, yeah, the rocket launchers appear. Jill gets a random shotgun. It drew me out. And Rebecca, bless her, she gets like a small little vignette of her arrival. The shark thing, before it becomes the final boss, takes out an entire SWAT team in one take, and half of them just disappear into the ocean. You don't see what happened to them. She's just fallen over on a pontoon, and then she's in the sewers of everyone meets up. I enjoy it as dumb visual shots, but as an actual quote unquote battle, I felt like it was very bad continuity. I appreciate that Jill got a final shot and the final word on the beast. I actually kind of liked the Chuckle Brothers rocket launcher bit, but
yes, Steve. Yes.
It all boils down to that like final shot where they're on the stairs and like, oh, that's nice. They just need a shawarma joke and then it would have been perfect.
No, what they needed was Barry in the helicopter.
Yeah, that works. That's going to be my weird takeaway because I don't want to cinema sins this film to death, and I did enjoy my time with it enough to watch it 3 times in preparation for the pod. Like not back to back. I'm not completely crazy, but the ending really dropped the ball for me. And the second Dylan goes, "Oh, the world will burn in an inferno of Blake." It's and Leon did a Mortal Kombat fight. That was all right, I guess.
Yeah, he did.
Literally did a fatality, sort of. Yeah. I feel like if they wanted to put him in Mortal Kombat, he's got enough moves now. Let's put it that way.
I'm down. Okay, cool. We will obviously... There's a lot to get into still in terms of character stuff and that. But first we'll talk about visuals because I want to talk about the way that the film looks and the animation and stuff. But actually, before we talk about that... let's talk about Magic Mind. James, in fact, I want you to tell me about Magic Mind.
Oh, whoops. There we go. Yeah, I'll tell you about Magic Mind. So as soon as I unmute my mic, and then I'll tell you. So, Magic Mind have been very nice recently, and they have given us a sample to use of theirs. They're basically like energy shot drinks, like the ones I had, and you have them with your morning coffee. You have one in the morning with your coffee. And they basically boost like your mind in a way, not like a magic potion or anything, but like it actually kind of boosts kind of my productivity. And during the couple of weeks I actually sampled Magic Mind, I was doing a pretty big project, and I was really focused. Sai, I think I was talking to you about it during the time, and a couple other folks in here as well. And I was completely zoned in. on getting this done, which is unlike me because I'm always procrastinating and I'm always going onto my social media or going onto YouTube to look up, various things or looking up.
Very easy to do.
Yeah, or looking up like reviews for Resident Evil Death Island. But yeah, I had a great time with it. I had one thing that I wanted to mention, and that was like I tend to get quite hyper focused when it comes to things I love doing. And that can be detrimental to me. But when I was on the Magic Mind energy shots, I actually felt focused instead of hyper-focused, which is very good because it means I actually had my wits about me and I could actually, know when to stop and know when to take a break and carry on again. And so if you want to try out Magic Mind, you can go to magicmind.com/first aid. That's FIRST AID, and you will get 56% off your subscription for the next 10 days with our code First Aid. However, you do also get a discount forever that will be slightly lower. But yeah, it will, if you go onto the site, if you go for the subscription system, not the one-time only system, then you will get your 56% off, and you also get an additional discount on top of that as well, because you'll be going into the subscription base. So yeah, check out Magic Mind if you want to have a more focused mind, because I definitely did.
Fantastic. Thank you, Magic Mind. Let's talk about visuals. Let's talk about the way this film looks. Because I can't make my mind up about it. Because some of it looked good, and I thought I don't know if it was just me. I've not heard anyone else talk about this. I felt like the prison zombie scene was just like really poorly animated. It just seemed really goofy in places. Kelsey, please tell me if it's just me.
No, Si, it's not just you.
Okay,
Okay, I'm going to say a couple of nice things first. The opening title sequence, I thought that was really good. Where it was all cut together a bit like a music video, showing clips from the game and the films and their mugshots and stuff like that. I just wanted to say, that's like, after that opening sequence and then to get that title sequence, I was like, yes, this is really good. Like, I'm so hyped. And then, like, for the movie itself, cinematography-wise, broadly good. James, you mentioned the shaky camera stuff, which did get overused. The idea is that they want this to feel like it was really shot. There's no crazy camera moves that can't be done with a real rig. So that's good, and it helps the film feel grounded and real. I thought that was a decent approach. And although a lot of it is kind of this flat, brightish lit colour palette where nothing really changes apart from the couple of scenes where they cranked in some atmosphere, which is like Jill's intro and in the sewers, I guess. Or I say sewers, they're not sewers, underground, whatever it is, underneath Alcatraz. So that was quite nice. And then, there was also that scene with with Claire and Chris and Antonio with the zombie and the little shootout and fight they had. I thought that had some nice atmosphere. Yeah. But then I think the CG itself, it just suffers from the same issues it always has, which is the overall render and character models and detail most of the time look really nice with lots of great detail and stuff. However, there are background characters and supporting characters that look kind of straight out of a PlayStation 3 cutscene. And I think... there's that YouTuber guy. I don't know if everybody can remember him. He just kind of looked unfinished. And it's the same with some of the zombies that you mentioned. So so generally the render looks good for the key characters, but the background stuff and the supporting stuff, not as good. And then the animation, just kind of same sort of thing in the background and some of the supporting and some of the fighting as well. It verges into incredibly kind of wonky territory. And although most of it is obviously mocapped, there's just times when loads of weird moments are happening with like arms moving in an odd way. Like you often see it when like a gun is getting reloaded or held strangely. It's just, it's missing that kind of that bit of polish, which comes really with just kind of like a lack of time and budget. And I think this is it's just the uncanny valley stuff, which no matter how good the key characters look, it's just still going to be there. And unless you spend a lot of time and money on this animation, it's never, ever going to look perfect. And, I can said it before, I can absolutely turn my mind off to that stuff. It's just like comes with the territory with these films. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that, you know, it's spoilt the film for me because some of the animation looks weird. I can still have a lot of fun with it, but yeah, the CG route, just again, it's not the best option for me. I think it can sometimes look a bit soulless, and I just really, really wish they do something different. At the end of our Infinite Darkness episode, we said, or I said, or somebody said, I think it was like, we want to go the 2D route now. Like, we'd love to see a 2D animated Resident Evil series because, yeah, I just think CG is a quick and dirty way to do it these days, and yeah, it shows. So sometimes it looks really nice. Sometimes it looks genuinely bad.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not just you.
Okay, good. It definitely had peaks and valleys for me. You absolutely nailed my sort of like weirdly one of my favourite parts immediately, which is that intro. I thought the intro was really cool. You should say like cool use of CGI films and game clips. And I know that's not really a fair thing to say because it's not really part of the film. But it was really cool to see all those little bits together. I was like, oh, cool. I wasn't expecting clips from this and that. You know, it was a little.
Well,
also.
it connects it the same way that the opening scene does. It's like, oh yes, this actually feels like this is taking place in the world that I love, and it's acknowledging the stuff that these characters have been through, rather than creating something new that's, you know, not necessarily going to be a bad thing. But yeah, it tapped into what I enjoyed straight away. So that's why that title sequence was effective, I think.
Yeah, and that being said, well, it did that well. I was a little bit confused why Jill didn't get a BSAA card and she had a STARS card. But, like, whatever, fine, we have to acknowledge STARS somewhere. Yeah. And apparently TerraSafe don't get any business cards as well because, weirdly, Claire had some Panam Stam journalist card or something. I was like, okay, yeah, sure, I guess, but whatever. Yeah, just very peaks and troughs for me, generally speaking. I think you largely covered it. Steve, how did you feel about the way the film sort of looks?
A damn sight more positive than Vendetta. Like, I wasn't a big fan of Vendetta's burst fire, John Wick aping tomfoolery. This felt a lot more slower paced. Although we do have, like, you know, extremely acrobatic zombies. Like Alka T, as I am calling it, after Alcatraz, and I'm very clever. Like, seems to make the zombies very, very, very fast. And I'm not a big fan of fast zombies in general, but for the gimmick of the movie, it was okay. I didn't appreciate the fact that some of the action, like everyone else said, could have been a bit blurry, could have been a bit messy, strange posing. But compared to what has come before, I actually felt it was at least readable. Like, ridiculous but readable. And I think that makes sense, right? Again, the character models, if you want a protagonist or a main villain, you're going to get, like, you know, bargain basement background filler, I'm afraid. You may even just be wearing the same grey trousers between you all, except for not Markiplier. Rest in peace, you absolute chundering F word. That bit was probably the most painful bit for me. Not to go into back to story, but that whole, like, trying to make a YouTube influencer moment. Ugh.
Made me laugh, so, you know.
Well, you know, different strokes for different folks. That's all I'll say there. But I feel like, generally speaking, it was okay. I've already voiced my piece about the final weapon BOW just basically being, like, you know, yawning at them or slithering its tail at them. But the lickers, for example, I thought were fantastically animated, although they don't get much screen time, tragically.
Yep.
Yeah, the fist fight between Maria and Leon, again, fantastically animated. The bike chase, I feel like, is underrated, because that felt like that could have been in a Matrix movie. The main central zombie shootout is probably the wobbliest bit, realistically.
It's a really good point about the bike scene. It is pretty good, actually, genuinely.
Yeah, character models, again, to reiterate a point, it's a shame that most of them are a greatest hits album. Like, you know, Jill's wearing her RE3R outfit. Claire's wearing the same outfit she wore that fateful day in either Panam Stan or RE2 Remake, depending on how you're feeling. Leon seems to be wearing a knockoff version of his RE4 Unlockable, one of his hero outfits or whatever. And Chris is still in the same gear he wore in RE5 and Vendetta. So that's a shame. Although I think Rebecca's got an updated outfit, hasn't she? It's like, you know, she's got a green shirt and now a black vest as opposed to a white vest.
Yes.
And a bouffant like thing to her hair. It's a lot more floaty than it used to be. Definitely redid her model, whereas I think Chris's is just visibly aged. I don't know. But yeah, other than that, It's okay, although the fact that the film's set in a prison has made the locations a little bit, legible, a little bit basic. Prison cells, underwater dock, the sewer of destiny. It's the most stunning shot visually probably was on the boat or on the beach, or what I say the beach, looking out onto the water,
onto the island. Yeah, with the shadow of the creature underneath. Yeah, that may well be the best single shot of the film. To be fair, James, how did you feel about the way the film looked? I mean, you talked about it a little bit, sort of being unreadable and stuff like that, a bit jump cutty. But any other points on the way the film looks?
Yeah, I thought overall the film, this is the best one we've seen. Out of all of the CGI movies. There was some inconsistencies with the mouths sometime and the expressions on the faces. Like there would be times when, has someone else mentioned this?
No, but I definitely saw it.
Okay, but yeah, there were some really weird moments where expressions would not really work for the scene. I can't explain it really, but they didn't really match. And yeah, the dubbing, the mouth flaps as they were didn't match what was going on. I tend to notice them a lot when I watch. Because I'm an eyes person and a mouth person. I want to see what their expression is, and I was noticing that a whole bunch. But yeah, forgetting what I previously said, well, not forgetting it, but taking away the things about the fast action and stuff. Yeah, I really liked what I was looking at. Especially, there was an uncanny valley thing to it, but right at the beginning, again, we'll go right to the beginning. We have that scene where they're in the truck, and those two folks were just talking to Dylan and I've forgotten his name, his friend
JJ.
They were having their JJ, yeah. They were having that discussion, and then their boss chimed in. I got an uncanny valley thing from that scene, but I also liked it a lot. And the same when they were in Raccoon City and afterwards. I don't think there's much more to add because when it comes to, everyone said such good points. The visuals are just very good, and I really enjoyed what I was looking at. They just need to slow it down.
And now, reading the file Giovanni's Will from Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, Master Dr. N7, who you can find on Linktree at Master Dr. N7.
It's too late for us. But at least I can let the world know what happened here. I was on night shift yesterday, so I was taking a nap in the bunk room around noon. I was half asleep, and I heard a kid, a little girl, laughing. Or was it all in my head? I woke up in 1930. There was some sort of ruckus in the passageway. Drew, one of the engineers, came in and said there was something going on down below. Maybe a riot. He looked pale in the face. He told me he was going down to check it out, but never came back. It must have been around 1950. I heard the scream. I went down to the laundry room to check and saw Clark being eaten by some sort of blackish monster. The monster turned and started coming towards me. Huge, shark-like teeth snapping its jaw. I just screamed like a little girl and ran for it. Now I'm huddled up in the bunk room, shaking as I write this. There's a whole host of those creatures lurking in the passageways now. I can still hear screams now and then, but there's no way I'm going out there now. And that's it. I've written everything I know. Giovanni Finetti.
Okay, cool. You guys also talked a little bit about the BOWs along the way, but we'll just take a little bit of time if anyone has any points that they haven't raised already. I guess, how do we feel about the selection of monsters in this film, which I didn't realise until afterwards when someone asked, is really just 3.5 things. Zombies, yeah. you got your aqua lickers, you've got unnamed Neptune sibling shark, whatever. We don't really get a good look at it, so I don't really know. Which then also becomes the Dylan monster because it ingests him, because that's how science works. I Yeah, I thought, as I said before, I thought the water lickers looked really cool. And you guys have said, quite rightfully, their animation was really, really good, and the way you used their tongues was really good. I talked about that. I did think that the giant shark there was a lot of build. There were several things. We'll get there. Several things that they really built up to that went nowhere. And there was plenty of foreshadowing for this big shark, BOW, like the whale with a bite taken out of it, and you see its silhouette under the water, as I just said. But ultimately, it feels a bit wasted because it immediately just becomes the Dylan monster. But the Dylan monster, it was cool. I liked his goofy little monster face. I thought that was kind of cool. And Steve, you're right about the legs as well. It was just a really interesting shape. There's a lot of big blob monsters in Resident Evil sort of things, big hulking brutes. And they can blur together. So I can absolutely understand if people feel like that's the case here. But I don't know, there's something about this that's quite memorable to me. It separates itself just enough to sort of stand out in my mind. I can very easily picture it. Broadly speaking. So, whilst there wasn't a lot of monsters, I guess because of the pacing, it would have been a little bit weird if they tried to shove any more in. But I was mostly happy with that. Other than we probably didn't get enough Shark Boy. James, how do you feel about the BOWs?
Yeah, there weren't many of them, was there? No, yeah.
Yeah.
So Yellow's just like brought up a really good point in chat, which was about there's a shot actually where you see the BOW, the shark, it's a sidelong shot of the ship as it's going towards the island, and you see the shark shadow going underneath the ship, and then going out, but it looks completely burned in. It looks like somebody's just got a shadow, an animated shadow, and just put it in.
Tracked it left to right.
Yeah, and just put the opacity right down. It looked really bad. But I wasn't super hyped about the BOW shark. I don't know why. I wanted to. I love sharks. Just for those that don't know, I love sharks. I want to go swim with sharks one day. It's one of my dreams. But I wasn't that excited about it because not much was really said about it. I think the last time we see it really, other than when it does its X transform, is is with Rebecca, the Rebecca fight, right? When she first comes onto the island, and the whole squad gets absolutely decimated. I that was the fun, and we didn't get to see much of it there. Actually, it was in a lot of shadow. I really would have loved to see more of it. The zombies didn't fit in the film. I don't know what it is about the CGI movies, but they always want to make their zombies really fast, right? And I know this was this is a different kind. You could always explain this, right? It's a different kind of virus, but the zombies we're used to are slow, methodical, and they're resilient, and these zombies weren't. They were bang, bang, dead, bang, bang, dead. Rah, I'm going to run at you. Very fragile, fast, and they didn't feel like they fit into this adventure because of that. I wanted to see more of the little mosquito boys, the drones.
True.
I think I only got 2 scenes with them, and it was very fleeting. But I wanted to see I wanted to see a little tiny, what virus was this called again? What do you call it?
It doesn't have one. It doesn't have a name, so
they just said it was the T virus, didn't they?
Yeah, we're calling it Alka-T now. That's first stage break canon.
Alka-T or the D virus.
Yeah. Sure.
I think they literally said it's the T virus, and just what? How?
Yeah, it's a strain of the T virus.
Yeah.
Okay, I just would have loved to see a mosquito version that had been transformed by the T virus. It would have been cool.
Come to think of it, isn't it technically a strain of the A virus because they say that he got it from Glen Arias? But never mind, whatever.
Emphasis on the A in Alka-T.
And the star of the show was the Lickers for sure. I agree with everybody. They were very cool. And do you know what's funny is that I think during the first trailer where we saw them, we were very hype about those. I think half of us were like, oh, I'm not sure, and then the other half were like, oh, they look cool, like Lickers in the water, that's terrifying, and they kind of were. Though I did want to see more of them. But I mean, things you love, you want to see more of, right? But yeah, I've already mentioned, I really liked the end boss as well. I thought his look was cool. He looked like an end boss of a Resident Evil game. I didn't like how he was dealt with. But yeah, towards the end, I can barely remember anything other than Leon and Chris's one-liners as he was crashing into everything around him at that point. There's my points.
Cool. Steve, how do you feel about the BOWs? Any more points to make?
As much as I think liquors are overplayed at this point, I like that they gave, there was two variants essentially in the film. There was the ones that fought Leon and Jill in the sewer, and then there was a kind that was basically a breeding ground. At first I thought, oh my god, have we got alvinoids? But no, they are just another variant of liquor with no limbs attached. But they're like biological incubators, and I feel like while it's probably not a reference, it kind of reminded me of the Remake's lab and the tanks that are just in that lab filled with weird flesh globules.
Yes.
Very grim, sciencey stuff. That stuff was kind of neat. Like, the little mosquito biodrones is also a novel concept. The idea of the virus being able to pick its target and it won't cross the infection, they'll just murder people, I thought was interesting. And it's not everyone's favorite podcast host. It's not FIO3 Neptune. I believe that's right.
Correct.
But as a scary Jaws monster, it had like one cool scene, and then it got relegated to basically be on an install buff for Dylan, so they can become a giant monster beast. Which I personally thought, well, while novel in the way it's shaped and calling back to Dylan himself, was also kind of a bit dull. I just saw a flesh thing with a face that yawned. I don't see the appeal. But yeah, liquor's cool. Otherwise, I was left a little bit lacking for the cool BOW department. We haven't really got anything akin to the tyrant fight from not Degeneration. Oh, Damnation. Damnation had the big tyrant fight. I still think that's like the best BOWs on screen. Sorry.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention something actually. Just something real quick that annoyed me, and this was about the BOW actually, so we're skipping... the visuals and the story actually. Are we just going to ignore the fact that, like, it was mentioned the entire perimeter of Alcatraz was, like, a marine sanctuary, and it was infected, and at the end, everybody just walks away? Like...
Yes.
The door's closed in Alcatraz. That means everything's fine, guys. Everybody can go home. You can go back into the marine sanctuary to swim. Anyway, that's it. I'm gonna go home.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, there are a lot of things like that where it's like, oh, Dylan's technology for the biodrones, that's definitely not going to, it doesn't have the ability to fall in anyone else's hands. All these weird incubator monsters, as Steve just pointed out, like that virus and the biodrones are just ridiculously OP. But yeah, we'll absolutely never go back to it, so don't worry about it, I guess. Kelsey, how do you feel about the creatures?
So Dylan's giant blobfish thing, like Steve, it's just kind of less interesting to me, though I do agree his face is kind of terrifying because he has like the skull, like human teeth in there, like sort of tucked away behind the big sort of fleshy bit. So that was kind of cool, and I did enjoy his lumbering movement, but because I think you said your favourite shot was the wide shot of Alcatraz. My favourite shot in this film is there's a Jurassic Park reference where he's lumbering and Jill's hand and a flare lights into frame and she just goes and goes, hey, ugly, and then it's the whole distracting the T-Rex thing, and I loved that section. And yeah, that shot is awesome where the flare comes into shot because he's in the background, the big monster, and then Jill's there to save the day. So I thought that was really good.
Yeah, fair point.
But I would have. There's a lot of kind of callbacks in this movie, and I think for me, I would have just loved to see like the classic OG Tyrant make a reappearance here rather than a big flesh monster. I think, but there's talk of the T virus and strain of the T virus. I've said before that OG Tyrant is my favourite. Would have loved to have seen that thing make a reappearance instead, but that's not what we got. I have a small bone to pick with how the liquors were introduced. Because they were awesome, absolutely loved them. But for my money, their introduction should have been Leon and Jill are there in this underground bit, and then the tongue comes in and whips through and pulls, I guess it's a zombie, or it pulls the other body out of the way, right? That should have been the first time that we saw the liquor or heard the liquor or whatever. But weirdly, we saw them, like, there was this shot a couple of minutes prior where you just saw a cage getting dumped into the water, and they're all there, and they swim out the cage, and then I think unintentionally, hilariously so, one of them just gets eaten by the big shark thing. And I was like, and it's all while Dylan's giving one of his silly speeches, and I thought it just kind of undermined what could have been an awesome, sort of arrival of the Lickers. I think the way that the Licker is not debuted, the way it appears in Welcome to Raccoon City is really good, where it walks across the ceiling and all the lights kind of, get knocked and stuff. They could have done something like that. So that really wound me up while I was watching it. But the Lickers themselves, great design. They do what they do in the games. You stand still, you don't move, they crawl past you. It basically did like the video game, this is my walk path. I walk up here and then I turn around and walk back here. And and obviously with the tongue movement and stuff, it was all kind of creepy. But I liked it. And the zombies were kind of lame, I suppose. I mean, again, they looked a bit rubbery and maybe had like an over-exaggerated ragdollness to them, which, isn't awesome. The one underground in the dark room with Antonio and Claire and Chris was quite cool. The one with Jill's intro was quite cool. But the little outbreak bit was just a bit too wild for me. They didn't really scare me. They weren't that cool. And I do wonder if, kind of slightly connected, and maybe we should have touched on this in story, you mentioned the plot armor, but does that like not open a can of worms? Because isn't the theory that all of these characters have some kind of immunity to the virus or something? So is that what we're watching here? Because the film literally had everybody turning in seconds, and then our heroes get infected with the virus, and they're all sat there just kind of squirming for about 10 minutes. So I was just watching it thinking, does this confirm that, or is it just the film being not very good? So I'm not sure.
I wish I had read this and probably checked it over beforehand, but I read something the other day, which I don't know if it was legit or not, but there was certainly some implication that there was a Japanese interview with the people behind this film that did confirm, in fact, yes, that Jill is not aging anymore because of the virus. And then they kind of were like, and I guess the other female characters too, because, of course.
Yeah, I read that same
So
interview.
I guess that sort of maybe fits into, you could argue a way that they didn't turn because, yes, they've all been infected or whatever.
Yeah.
So
it's slightly connected. But otherwise, BOWs, there's not a lot of them. I did love the Lickers, and End Boss guy was just kind of generic, but fine, I suppose. Not too much else to say.
All right, well, let's get into characters then, because this is the other big thing to talk about, certainly, because of course it is, right? This is the first film where we've had, it's the first piece of Resident Evil media where everyone's come together, and more than that, also we have Jill Valentine returning to the series after 14 years of absence, if you don't include random spin-offs and Remake 3, which is a remake. So, like, in terms of in-universe time, it's 14 years of in-universe time. It's been a lot longer, in fact, in real life, but yes, regardless, point is, Jill is back, everyone's here. What do people feel about the characters? Steve, let's start with you. How did you feel about the ensemble? Did you feel like everyone was fairly represented? Any standout positive moments for everyone?
Honestly, this is the reason I've rewatched the film a few times. I feel like, for all the foibles, and I feel like I've nitpicked this film to death, just seeing the characters on screen and they're recognisably being what we at least see them as, at least for the most part, is neat. The interactions with Chris and Jill initially, my first viewing, actually made me very angry, because I felt like, how dare you talk down to her and all these things. Like, it took me a second viewing to realise he's just trying to, get her to not risk her life and other things like that. And it was kind of like seeing it from that lens, like, Chris is actually decent in this film, and that led it to seeing everyone else's virtues as well. I can't unsee this film being like the classic RE4 Leon, just a bit more mature though. Like, compared to every other version of the CGI films, where he's either a plank of wood or is miserable, it's actually a nice, refreshing change to have a Leon who's not miserable. Maybe he's just a little bit tired, but he seems to be having fun and vibing with it. And obviously, Jill is the standout. Basically, her and Dylan are both suffering with a variant of, I don't want to throw the word around casually, but like a form of PTSD over what they've gone through. Like, it feels like that not the same trauma, but a trauma is affecting them both, and that's the main thrust of the film. And it's nice to see Jill being a little bit more stressed, but also recognisably still, not a complete jerk with it. They're trying to basically prove themselves, it feels like, or taking maybe a few more risks. That might be why she jumps into the random sewer of, Destiny or whatever. But yeah, it's good to see her back again. Obviously, she's the central focus of the film. Rebecca is sidelined this time, but she still is the Deus Ex Machina to save the day. And sadly, I feel like while you do see Claire do Claire things, like save people, she's the one who's most relegated to the back. Out of the core 5, 4 and Rebecca. No offense, Rebecca, sorry. She's the one who gets relegated. Main villain, though, had a lot of potential, I feel like. I feel like Dylan, if they had lived, and if they had maybe veered a little bit away from the James Marcus-ness at the end, could have been a compelling villain to have recurring. I think we already said this earlier. But having someone who's suicidal, but also megalomaniacal, and they have a goal that, at least on paper, was a bit more complex than just, and the world will burn in an inferno of hate, would have been cool. But then it's wipe the slate as opposed to mess up the corporations and maybe mess up the BSAA. And I can understand if that were their goal to then take out these characters, because they are principally star players in various outbreaks that they have obviously studied. If you look at the opening intro, some kind of vignette of what he's trying to figure out who to take out to stop him. Admittedly, he just kind of they show up. It's time to begin my evil plan, and I will now inject myself. The end, which is a shame. Oh, and yes. the knockoff Jill Valentine lady from RE5, Vendetta Maria. I kind of actually feel like if Jill had had an actual fight with her, that would have been cool. Almost a defeat your own demon kind of thing. Otherwise, she's just kind of there. If she wasn't there, you didn't have to tell me this was a Vendetta sequel. I wouldn't have minded.
Yeah, fair. There's loads of things that I definitely want to get into there, but I'll let some other people speak. But I do want to get into some things about Dylan, because I agree. I think actually he would be an amazing villain if his plot didn't just jump off the diving board at the end. And it doesn't help that he's the 7th one-shot villain that we've had at this, probably more at this point. But the ingredients there, whilst they're all pretty standard, really, they've all been done elsewhere and perhaps better. I do like, he's got a lot of interesting things going on with the Russian roulette gimmick, and he's got a cane, and he's got this backstory that we've seen unfold, which is genuinely, I think harrowing is quite an extreme word for it, but it is really interesting to watch it unfold. And you do feel for the guys, though it's really well shot from the sort of perspective of JJ as he's getting his head bashed in while Dylan does what he must. I thought it was all really, really good. The only problem is, of course, that a lot of it just doesn't pay off. The Russian roulette thing is almost literally a Chekhov's gun. But it doesn't pay off. He spends the whole movie threatening to shoot himself in the head. And you think, okay, so at one point he's going to shoot himself in the head and then come back as a monster because it's Resident Evil. No, he just stops shooting himself in the head and becomes a monster. It's so what was the point of the Russian roulette thing?
The only thing I can think of, and I apologise for interrupting, but is it the bit with the MP5s? Because he had an MP5 that was empty, but he thought it was full. That's the only thing I can think of, but they don't really make a big deal of it.
Oh yeah, the backstory for it's fine, but have it go somewhere. Have him aim at someone else and go click and say, it looks like you'll save this or something or whatever. Maybe he goes through the entire group when they're all sort of infected by the prison. I know it'd be really obvious, but click, 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 and the one person he shoots is Dr. Taylor, which is what he does. Just do something with the Russian roulette. But no, it seems like an integral part of his character until it's suddenly not anymore. But otherwise, I thought he was a really strong villain. I would have liked to have seen more, despite the fact that there are gigantic flaws there. KDB, how do you feel about the characters?
Dylan, as I mentioned earlier as well, I thought presented well and was an interesting enough a perspective and had motivation to latch onto. So I'm with you. Could have been, there was a lot of potential there and could have been used a lot more. And he had all those little gimmicks which nothing happened with, and he was doing the cane tapping of the floor and stuff that could have been really creepy and built on and stuff. But just with more screen time and context would have been really good. But it's a shame. As for the rest of them, I think Jill is one of my 2 MVPs. Steve, I'm going to disagree with you about one of them as well. So for Jill, like, not only did she have multiple badass set pieces, my favourite being the knife use, which also foreshadowed the end as well. Flipping about with that knife and running along and stabbing the zombies and stuff. I think character-wise, she actually felt like she was in a place that she would be at this point in the timeline. A little detached and rogue, but determined. And I thought the performance was probably the best of the lot too. It was more understated than RE3 Remake, which is definitely the right choice because of all the stuff that she's been through since then. So yeah, big fan of Jill in this film. Awesome to see her back. It's funny to think when this film was first announced, everyone was like, oh no, Jill's going to get relegated to like a 3-second flashback or something.
Yeah.
And no, she's the main character and has officially the most screen time as well. So that was, really, really good. Claire, so yeah, Steve, this is where I disagree with you. I mean, thank God, we touched on it already. She had, infinitely more to do than Infinite Darkness, where she was relegated to drinking coffee and being captured. And
a lamp.
In this movie, she's investigating, she's shooting, she's hacking. She said the dreaded line, "We're in."
She did.
But what you're gonna do? So yeah, Claire and Jill were MVPs, and we've mentioned the way Claire was kind of caring about Antonio despite him being like a complete asshole. Yeah, I really love how Claire was presented in this movie, and like it's nothing huge in the way of development, and I think everybody outside of Jill is kind of the same with that. There's just nothing that really pushes these characters forward, but as a presentation of Claire, another big thumbs up. Leon was in far too much of a good mood for my liking. His existence in this movie was pretty much to crack one-liners, and again, just after everything he's been through, I thought he'd be a little bit more forlorn, especially after the events of RE6. But yeah, I don't know. It's he was fine, and it sounds like I'm being critical. He did make me laugh a lot, and I enjoyed his presence. And for a character that I've kind of been back and forth on and very up and down on, I thought it was good. It didn't make me dislike him, so yeah, it was okay. And then yeah, Chris and Rebecca were there too. They were both kind of relegated in comparison to the rest. I think they both had stuff to do, which is very important. I touched on that earlier. And Rebecca, even though, so for somebody like her who it's like, well, did she even need to be in this film? Well, she didn't need to, but the reason she was in it made sense. And again, just the presentation of her being there and bringing the vaccines, and they're her friends, or they're her friends and her colleagues. It does make sense. So I would have loved to have seen more of Rebecca. She was definitely the one that was, I think, had least to do. But it was, nice to see them all together. I think all of these characters, the ensemble, I think generally it was broadly good. And as I said, nothing that hugely advanced them, but I don't think that's the point of these films. I think the juicy stuff is always going to be saved for the games. So yeah, as a fun movie outing with seeing them all together, it definitely hasn't done any damage, I think, to any of them appearing in the film. I think it's possibly my most positive section. They all were kind of good in their own ways, and absolutely love Jill and Claire, my MVPs.
I'm completely with you. Like, this is the thing that I'm most positive about as well. And when it comes to Claire and Rebecca, I completely agree. You said such a poignant thing there about it doing damage, unlike Vendetta, which was dreadful for several characters. When Leon murders people on a freeway, just whatever, okay, apparently that's the thing he does. And Rebecca gets put in a wedding dress and captured immediately after it happening in Biohazard the stage, which actually, now that I think about it, might have come out afterwards. But it's besides the point, the fact that they brought her back to the series after so long and immediately made her a damsel in distress. And I'm really glad no one played the role of that in this film, which was nice. And especially as well that and I'm not saying that the Claire and Rebecca can't have cool, like, more standard badass moments of like action heroism, and Claire did get a few of them, but I'm really glad they got to have some cool moments that represented them some more as sort of support role characters, which is what the sort of action heroes of the series at this point really are. Chris and Leon, and now returning Jill, is a big sort of part of the film, is the fact that she is still action woman and she'll put herself in danger and stuff. So it was a really good for me, instead of just having everyone firing rockets at the monster. It's really cool to have that moment, as we said before, where Claire and Rebecca, not a pairing I'd ever considered before, but seeing them together, work together behind the scenes a little bit was really cool.
Yeah.
It speaks to their character arcs at this point, with Claire working for TerraSave and Rebecca being sort of like, you know, an independent person that works with the BSAA on certain investigations and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm with you. I think the representations of those characters, all of them were really good, and we'll get into more of them in a bit. But those two especially, yeah, great examples. James, how did you feel about the characters in Death Island?
I really like Jill, and I like how dark and moody she was. It made complete sense based on her character. I feel like they did well to fill in all that chat she has with Chris was very important at the beginning.
Yes.
They did great with the script there, like explaining what had happened, and I could really, through the screen, I could feel her pain that she was feeling. And Chris, unlike some of the games, was being very accepting and validating towards her, which was really good to see. He was being a good character, a good friend to her, because that's what they are. There is, I know there's been a lot of like positive things to say about Jill, right? But there are some lines she delivered that were flat or that were weird. Like, Kels, you mentioned the scene earlier with the flare, and it was really cool. Like, it was a reference to Jurassic Park and stuff, and it was really dope. But the way she says ugly did not hit it. She goes ugly. She puts in so many E's. I don't know if that was the right way to go, but I just wanted. She didn't. I don't know why that was put in. It was very strange, and it took me completely out. I actually burst out laughing at that point, because it just felt like a 5-year-old was, just telling off a BOW at that point.
I'm pretty sure, James, I don't mean to interrupt, I'm sure I read in one of those interviews with Nicole, she said they didn't do loads of takes for this movie.
Okay.
Now you've said that, it's like, maybe that was like a one and done.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Like, maybe she did 5 other takes or 4 other takes or whatever, and they were just no, these ones aren't working. Well, let me get the last one, and they're like, yeah, that's it. This is the one. But other than that, Jill was standout for me. I would have, as everybody, I would have loved some more Rebecca, but as usual, she is the hero. If it wasn't for Rebecca, everybody would have died, and so she had a really big part to play, but she was a small part, and it would have been nice to see more of that. Now, another kind of negative thing I'm going to say is, to no one's surprise, I hate Dylan, right? And I think to bring the whole gang together to beat Dylan the villain is a lost opportunity. I mean, a no-name villain, to bring everybody back together? No, thank you. That was really...
Yeah, this is my point. We're missing 10 episodes of TV show or something. It's a shame.
Yeah, it was just... Yeah, I couldn't get... Yeah, I couldn't get behind that. I mean, they were trying to push... we said it earlier, well, Kels, I think you mentioned it earlier about how OP these BOWs were. Right, so it makes sense that everybody would have to come together, but the villain just wasn't interesting enough for everybody. Everyone doesn't come together for Wesker, for Christ's sakes, and they come together for the guy that was in Raccoon City one time, who everybody forgot. It was really silly. And then, to expand on some more, I mentioned earlier, there were some moments in it where, you had stupid people problems, right? And Chris and Claire were a part of that at one point. So I can't remember his name, but the butthole that Claire, he calls her a terrorist. I can't remember his name, but
Antonio,
thank you. Yeah, they don't check if that guy's bit. They don't check if he's bit. He comes through. He's just come through a whole avenue, like a tunnel. This happens a couple times, and I put in my notes: if this dude Chris and Claire found his bit, and Claire doesn't check thoroughly, I'm gonna riot, and I am gonna riot. Right? It's just that's just at this point. After in their case, almost 20 years, like, of dealing with this kind of stuff, right? You don't check if somebody's been bit after you haven't seen them. They just come through the door, right, and say all these wild things. You check if they're bit. It just, Chris, you should also check. That was it. That was pretty much like the last kind of point I have with those two. Leon, I think when we were kind of hyping this or kind of talking about this in previous episodes, we were worried because I don't think the guy can't remember his name, but the guy who's normally a Leon fanboy who does these CGI films, it wasn't a part of this one as much. And we were like, oh, thank goodness, Leon isn't going to be like the main character, and he wasn't. However, he did do a very Leon from the other CGI movies thing, which is like him going up against a super soldier and just stumbling his way through the fight somehow, and not just being outright clobbered. Somehow he was managing to parry this massive thing somehow every opportunity he got. That's me being nitpicky, though, to be honest, like, completely. I also, just some small things about character stuff. I actually gonna ask everyone in here and folks listening, first of all, I want to say I want Jill's long cardi from the beginning, because it looked very comfy and I want it. And second of all, what was on Rebecca's coffee mug? CM plus CC XWC.
So yeah, what is that? Like chocolate, God. Like mocha, like it's latte or something?
I think it's white chocolate cappuccino. And I can't remember what the last bit is, but somebody actually pointed out on Twitter what it was.
I want to have it.
XWC? XWC extra, because
the chat says it's V-Jolt, James.
but it was CM plus CC times WC. So I
don't know.
So what does that mean? Everybody, just give me a tweet. Let me know, like, what that is, because it's very important to Rebecca Chambers' character development. Okay.
Yes. I know what her white girl Starbucks order is.
And I also want to become that white girl. So if you would like to give me that recipe, I'd appreciate it.
Fantastic. So you guys have said, obviously, a lot of stuff that I was definitely going to say about characters, because we're all very much in agreement. Like, it's great to see Jill back, and in a major role. They allow her to be cool. They allow her to have some sarcasm as well in there. And they do address, finally, some of the questions regarding her past, even if it is a little, slight. It could have probably gone deeper with it, but it's fine. With the pace of the film, it needs to keep going, so I'm not too mad about it. It is a little odd that it's 6 years since the events of Resident Evil 5. Seems like quite a big stretch of time, but if I wanted to look at that positively, that's 6 years now, where if they wanted to do some kind of other interquel and have PTSD-stricken Jill, there's plenty of room in there for some Jill stories in there while she's still sort of going through the motions, whereas this is kind of feels like the beginning of, or a major point in sort of her recovery from that, which is clearly what they're aiming for. I talked about the other ladies, but I'll talk about the men as well. I really like Chris in this. I really like Chris in this. It's like the sort of soft guardian character, as everybody's correctly pointed out. He might be the character with the least to do. But he added something to it to me. It's not Daddy Redfield with his stupid, holiday shirt on. I actually quite enjoyed Chris in this. And Leon's an interesting one because a year before this in Vendetta, he's in the mopey alcoholic state that Chris was in RE6, and he's fine now. I guess he's all okay a year later, so that's good. And I think for almost every character here, with the exception of Chris, this is the most recent in the canon that we've seen them, even though it is 6 years before the events of Village.
Yeah.
This is the most recent appearance for pretty much all of these characters, so it's a good idea. It's our best idea of where they're at when it comes to the present day or whatever might come next in terms of new storyline stuff. So Leon absolutely fit in well here. They needed a character to be a bit more like the comic relief, and they absolutely made the right choice, of course. He might have my favourite line in the film, which is so dumb, when Dylan does his James Marcus, as Steve has put it, and, whatever the villain line is, where it's like, finally, I've gathered you all here. And Leon goes, well, if it isn't whoever you are. It was great. The delivery was great. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was just so nice to have them all here. And as everyone has said, Jill got the most amount of screen time, but I don't feel like anyone was particularly done dirty, which is the most important thing. No. And this, it absolutely is a reason to enjoy a rewatch of it as well, certainly. Which brings us nicely on to audio, I guess, which will be... We can talk about music and stuff like that, absolutely, but I think the main point is to talk about the performance of the voice actors. And again, something that I was just really happy with, and it's a really weird, wonderful, oddball mishmash cast, because we have some stuff with people coming over from Vendetta, with Matthew Mercer back as Leon, Kevin Dorman back as Chris, Erin Carhill as Rebecca again, but we also have Remake 2 and Infinite Darkness Claire with the current voice actor and Stephanie Panisello, and obviously the current voice actor for Jill being Nicole, who did a fantastic job. There might have been some weird, awkward line reads, and I'm going to have to search out this ugly line, but I think for the most part she did a really good job of sort of aging her up appropriately. Despite the issue that we got with her dressing like it's still 1998, which I cannot stand, the fact that they've turned these characters into cartoon characters now, with her and Claire in particular. Claire at this point is just erasing her entire wardrobe for that red jacket, and I'm very, very displeased. But performance-wise, I think they all pretty much killed it, really. So I'm pretty happy with that as well. It's also worth mentioning that Sally Saffioti, if I'm saying that right, returning as Ingrid Hunnigan. I don't think she was in Vendetta, but she's got a voice role in this, which was nice to have her back. And Steve, you pointed out an interesting bit of trivia to me before we recorded, so I'm going to let you go first. What did you think of the return of Hunnigan and the voice acting in general?
Honestly, it was cute. It was amazing because it felt very nostalgic. I like it when Leon and Hunnigan have banter in the various moments they have. So I know it can be a bit of a flirty git in the original RE4, but otherwise they've always been I feel like a team, a duo. I would like to see a slightly more tailored down Leon adventure in the modern or present day, where he's got Hunnigan in his ear as his lady on the comms. They can even walk slowly with their hands on the rear, like they do in video games. It was just fun. But yeah, she's now the longest recurring voice actress, isn't she? Even after the ever illustrious Alison Court. Surprising. That's almost feeling like a separation of eras to me in a way. Regarding the other voice actors, I kind of want Kevin Dorman to come back as Chris in game, because of the energy he kind of brought to him. I really like. I love Dad energy Chris. The ending line where he says, "This op sucked." This song, yeah, man, I feel you. I actually feel that energy, and the way that he was considerate to Jill, pretty good. Steph Panisello is a divisive character. I still like her take on Claire. Leon, Matt, I know everyone likes Nick Apostolidis, but there was something about the way Matt did this role this time. I don't mind Matt taking the crack at Bat too.
It's nice that we get both, isn't it? What a wonderful thing that we can have both and just appreciate both.
Yeah, we can have young Leon, and that's Nick, and old Leon, that's Matt. Not saying you're old, Matt, but you get what I'm saying. They all did solid turns. I feel like if there are a few wonky line reads, that they're all overshadowed by the way they actually put the chemistry of the characters on screen together. That's the reason I keep watching the film. Excluding, of course, evil Russian villain lady only has 3 lines and "you killed my father" or whatever she says. That was obviously a bit hokey. Dylan Blake, okay, actually. I thought the only line read I thought of is it was a little bit naff was the opening, "Stop it!" But that might have been the CGI. Maybe the voice and CGI just didn't mesh very well. Otherwise, had a decent stage presence, I felt like. So yeah, no real complaints on that. The only other note I had is the film only had like one song, and that was that da 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 da, or we can't afford the Avengers theme. Yeah, it had a leitmotif, I guess, because I think there's little gentle remixes of that, but that's the only theme they had, which is a shame. But that's modern movies and music, I guess. But
Tell you what, though, I did like the theme, though, the intro theme. It's worth saying. I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, other than that, audio-wise, I had no real complaints.
Yes, I also just want to shout out Dylan Blake, played by Damon Mills, by the way, who's an absolute pro, so I'm really not surprised. You might know them as the new voice of Freezer.
Okay.
Yeah, after the death of Chris Ayers, it's Damon Miles that took over. So I'm really not surprised that he's got that commanding villain presence. I was like, yeah, he was really good in that role.
Very different energy. I didn't even pick. I'm normally good for 100%. Voices.
Yeah, 100%. You wouldn't. I would never have guessed that, but yes, absolutely. James, any thoughts on audio? And also, I believe we might now have the answer to your question already about Rebecca's coffee. Is that right?
Oh, fantastic! This is very important.
Is that not as chat worked it out? Yeah, it looks like they might have got some of it.
There's been some. Oh yeah. Anyway, any good to you?
Sorry,
I
go
will
on.
check it out. We've got caramel macchiato with extra whipped cream.
That's what the XWC is. Yeah.
Okay,
CC.
extra whipped cream. Okay, that makes sense. This is very.
Told you it was white girl Starbucks order. I know, as someone who orders white girl Starbucks.
Yeah, as I say, this is very important and will be used for very important things.
Look for that video on the channel soon.
Yeah.
I can't really say much more. I think because I do think that Dylan, the VO for Dylan, did a great job. The character was written badly.
Yeah, that's fair.
He's just not very well thought out, and that's not the VO's fault at all. As usual, Matt can't do any wrong with me. Matt, even though I don't particularly like Leon, I suppose he's middling, in this, because he still doesn't quite fit the Leon I know and love. It's Matt Mercer, so I'm just gonna have love for him because of Matt. So I mean, I feel like Leon. For me, I feel like Leon and Jill were big standouts for me. In terms of their VOs, again, I am biased with Dylan coming in second, whereas everybody else kind of didn't really elevate themselves, but I think that was on purpose. Especially Chris, he was meant to take a sidestep. He's the one that he's the team leader. He's the one that's meant to bring everybody together, and he did do that. He did his job. And then with Claire and Rebecca, their twosome, that was great to see. And they acted well together. And the VO for them was again fantastic. In terms of the sound effects and stuff, again, everything was very generic. There wasn't anything that stood out. And normally I'm very susceptible to a good womp womp sound or something charging up, anything like that. But the plasma rifle didn't really impress me. But I mean, what can you ask for? It's a Resident Evil CGI movie. You're going to get typical Michael Bay, explosions and stuff. Nothing blew me away in that aspect. Excuse the pun. That's pretty much it, because everyone else said it, really good points. Actually, in terms of the monster BOW sounds, I think they could have been done better. Actually, they're a little bit subpar, I think. Even the liquors, because the liquors felt quite generic to me. And again, like Steve brought up, the sighing of Dylan, which was the sighing of Dylan. Wow, that sounds like a 80s Pulp Fiction book, But yeah, the sighing.
New album by David Bowie.
I think that's all I got to say about that.
Cool. Okay, KDB, any final thoughts on audio?
No, not really. I think everyone's covered it. I don't want to say flawless. I just think it was really strong across the board with the voice acting. Music wise, I don't really remember too much of it, but yeah, really, really cool that we're talking about the voice acting and kind of gushing a bit. I think everyone did a really good job. I was just having a quick look, seeing if I could find that interview that I was talking about, and I did, and I will post it in the chat. Audio listeners won't see this, but basically there was a couple of things I wanted to point out, and one was they did ask Matt a question about Leon, and they basically said, what brought you back to Death Island? And he essentially says, I was completely surprised. So I think, I don't know what the reason was for him being brought back, but he says also that he loves the work that Nick's done, and he's done incredible work, and maybe, who knows, we'll have a Leon verse down the road. So I thought that was quite fun. But like you said, Si, it's just so cool that I think they can both exist, and they can, there's nothing wrong with having a tag team of awesome voice actors like jumping into the role for whatever. Maybe it was just an availability thing, who knows. And then I knew I wasn't making it up. Nicole said something about bloopers, and she says, you want to do a line and say, that's not right, let's do it again, and the producers in the booth are like, well, it fits, so we're keeping it. So so maybe that's what you were talking about, James.
Fair enough.
Yeah, but yeah, really, really cool. I love the voice acting in this. I thought Nicole was really good, Matt was really good, even though I kind of made fun of Leon and his corny one-liners. All of them made me laugh, so job done, I suppose.
Yeah. When it comes to voice actors, my only last point, since we're on the sort of subject of talking about, characters having multiple voice actors right now, I've expressed my, I don't know what the emotion is, with Chris from Village. I have no issue with Jeff Sheen, playing Carlos. It really took me out when he played Chris as well with the same voice. I really would like Kevin Dorman in a Resident Evil video game. Especially if they're going in soft Chris routes, and I doubt they are, considering the story that we're coming out of Village. But it'd be interesting to see if he can play a more rough and PO'd kind of Chris as well. But I really like the fact that, the story of Kevin Dorman as the voice of Chris in the RE5 trailer, who didn't get his proper way to the role until Vendetta. Like, he had to wait all that time to actually get to play Chris, and now he's got to come back for Death Island, and I'd be happy to see more of it, absolutely. But yes, across the board, the fact that we had some variety and stuff was really nice, and everybody felt like the characters they should be, and it didn't feel weird that we had remake era voice actors interacting with some returning voice actors. So let's get to the conclusion then. Let's wrap it up. How did we feel about Death Island? Where does it rank in terms of the CGI Resi films? And since we've all mentioned it a little bit, would we be interested in a third film that maybe jumps off from this in the same, and we didn't talk about it too much, but the link to Vendetta is quite small, but would you be interested in seeing another follow-up quite quickly after this? We have Infinite Darkness and Death Island in quite short order, so who knows. Kelsey, what are your thoughts on Death Island as a whole?
So I think pleasantly surprised is kind of one way to sum it up. I did have low expectations going in, so that probably helps, but also I don't want to do a disservice. I think there was a lot of fun to be had in this, despite some of my criticisms today. I think for me, it was the most enjoyable of the CG movies. It felt like it was speaking to me by focusing on the iconic heroes, even though, Sherwin's not here. Barry, where's Barry? Sadly, no Barry, but maybe he's going to come in this supposed third film. Visuals are fine, sometimes really good, sometimes not. I think the story we got was simple enough, fun. I loved that it expanded the perspective of a character in the universe and story that we already know. It was just missing, as always, kind of more time to breathe. I felt that we always say that a lot about the sort of Resident Evil screen media. So some more time to stew on things. It's a bit of a shame. So it was really fun, just a little bit disposable. Maybe that's a bit too harsh. I think you can enjoy the Resident Evil games and such without ever watching this film. It's surplus to the canon in lots of ways. It doesn't give us huge leaps in character development, except for maybe Jill, which I think, really, really strong there. So for the most part, it was definitely a film I enjoyed. I just think, a bit disposable. I don't think, like some other stuff, it's, an embarrassment to the franchise. It doesn't actively do harm to the franchise or the characters. Things are very up and down with RE, as we know. We're all very spoilt, but it's just, I think even my disdain for the CG route, as I've said, I can put that aside. This feels like, shockingly, that it was made with some care and attention, and I think they probably pulled off the best job they could do with probably the budget and time that they had. So if you're a fan of Resident Evil and you have nothing else to do, definitely chuck it on and watch it. You'll probably smile and laugh and see all the characters and have fun. It's not going to hugely challenge you or change your life, but I don't think it's supposed to. It's rambling a bit. I liked it way more than I thought I would. It's a thumbs up from me.
Cool. James, final thoughts on Death Island. Where does it rank for you? Would you be interested in another one?
Yeah, I mean, like Kel's said it really well there. Like, it's not something you should take very seriously, and none of the CGI films are. And I have taken it quite seriously to a certain extent, just on a critical level. I do think that's important, but at the same time, you do need to have an open mind to these movies. It's going to be interesting, like, if these CGI movies ever attempt to get to, like, beyond 2020s and the 2030s. It's going to be interesting to see what they do, like, with the future. But yeah, just judging by the past of CGI movies, again, as Kel said, they haven't really not tried is the wrong word, but they haven't pushed the franchise, with these. They haven't, like, done any risks or anything. It's clearly a pattern. There's a flow and there's a recipe that they have for these CGI films. In conclusion, like, it is, out of all of them, it's my favorite by far.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, even with all the silliness towards the end, and it is like the beginning of it is such a huge upvote for me. Like, it's huge. It's such a good start, and I love all the little vignettes you got and the small kind of scenes you got, and they're very good. And I think they kind of raise it up for me beyond everything else. And yeah, it did make me giggle. I do need to watch it again. I've watched it twice now, but I do need to watch it again. Because I also feel like it's the kind of movie that you do need to be in the mood for. If you just want... Yeah. Like, I feel like this is a good movie to watch with friends. If you have friends around and you all love Resident Evil, just as the franchise, put on this movie and you're all going to be having fun, whether it is laughing at the characters and the liners or the silly story or not, you're going to be having fun watching this movie.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because you say about, it doesn't move the series forward, and largely I agree, but as Kelsey's pointed out, at least we've got some resolution, potentially, to what's been going on with Jill for all this time. And as much as I hate Infinite Darkness, it ended on a really interesting note with the dissolution of Claire and Leon's relationship, which I guess at some point got fixed again because I guess they don't overly interact in this, so we don't know that for sure. But they may well never go back to that. But there's some stuff that they could build on from here, whether or not they will. I'm with you guys. Stupid fun. It's very flawed. I'm going to be bold in two different directions. I think this film might well be utterly worthless unless you've got a couple of Resident Evil games under your belt at least. Like, if you were coming into this and this is your first interaction with the franchise, I don't know, it'd be very whatever, but as a fan, it's kind of fun because of, you get to see all the characters together, hanging out in different pairings and stuff like that. And there's tons of references that are very clearly designed for the fans. And for that reason, I enjoyed it, even though that is arguably quite a vapid reason to enjoy a film. I think that the ending, for all of its flaws, is the best scene in a Resident Evil animated project, bar the Damnation Tyrant fight. That Steve, you quite rightfully brought up earlier, that you're right, that is probably going to always be king, but this is right up there. And in terms of the CGI films, this, again, I'm the same. This is my favourite quite comfortably, and it might well be my favourite Resident Evil film, full stop. I think this... Welcome to Raccoon City is pretty good fun, and Apocalypse is good fun in its own stupid way. But this certainly sits among those films. I'm not quite sure, but it might be. I don't know. I enjoyed it. Very positive. Steve, how do you feel about Death Island?
Oh boy, I've already been very ramblomatic this podcast, so I'll just be succinct and say that after the Netflix show Infinite Darkness and Welcome to Raccoon City, it's nice that I can watch a Resident Evil film and enjoy it. And I will fully
Yes.
attest that if you're not a Resident Evil fan, one, getting to the end of this podcast and hearing my thoughts on it, very impressive. But also, two, don't watch it. Like, yeah, it's literally, if you're not a Resident Evil fan, it will be, like Sai said, worthless. Yeah, I can't wait for the next one. That's something I didn't think I'd say. And this is despite the fact this film has had perhaps one of the worst distributions ever for a Resident Evil property product. I don't know what you want to call it. Yeah, in the next one, can we at least get like maybe Barry, Moira, Sherry, Jake, anyone else I can think of quick? Ada, I guess. Maybe. You know, let's do the full Avengers thing. You know, don't bring Wesker back; he's crap. But maybe Spencer or somebody. Did I just call Wesker crap on a podcast for Resident Evil? Oh god, I'm gonna get shot. Yeah, no, Death Adam's all right. Yeah, I didn't hate it. I can fully admit that I've nitpicked this film to death, but yeah, it's C+.
Yeah, I don't know if I would go. Let's have every other character we had that's not in this in the next sequel.
Yeah,
but
Avengers side, you got to think. You know, Kevin Feige
has to get bigger every time.
Resident Evil Academy.
Yeah, we need Barry or Andor, another couple of extra characters, and a few of the core cast to carry on. Maybe not all 5 of them into the next film. That's what I'd have. Certainly be down to see what happens in, I assume, 2016, considering that Vendetta and Death Island take place in 2014 and 2015. But that's all pie in the sky. Like, they've not announced anything, and who knows what goes into factoring if they're going to make another one. But we've all been positive enough, clearly, about seeing more of this, which is, again, quite remarkable considering how Infinite Darkness was quite a miserable podcast for us to do, so much so that James just pulled out beforehand because I'm not talking about this, and I completely understand. So it is nice that even with all the nonsense coming into this and its availability, that we all at least had a good time with a Resident Evil animated piece of media. Finally. Look forward to covering the first 3 films, which we've not yet done in future episodes of the show. But nothing else remains for me but to thank our contributors, our Patreons, our listeners, and of course Magic Mind as well. Join the First Dates Break Discord server to become part of our community and hear the show early and unedited. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and more. All of these links and all of our content can be found at faspraypod.com. You can listen to the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, and all good podcasting apps. And if you like what you hear, please do leave us a review where you can and spread the good word. Don't forget you can support the show by picking up some merch or at patreon.com/FASprayPod for as little as $1 a month. In our next episode, we head back to the labs to experiment on our T-virus as we discover the various strains of the virus in part 2 of our virology series. Thank you to the panel. You can follow all of the Pueblo people individually. I'm at Syniac_123. Steve is at FB Steve was taken. James is at Moist Owlets OFF. And Kelsey is at K_D_B_. And finally, thank you for listening and have a good week. So what have we decided here, right? So CM is caramel macchiato,
right.
Is that right? CC is chocolate
C?
chips, people think, and
No,
XWC is
sure.
extra whipped cream.
Coffee creamer.
Chocolate chips?
Coffee cream.
In
Coffee creamer. But apparently on this website that has all the Starbucks sort of codes, CC isn't actually on there, so...
CC.
It doesn't even...
It could be coffee creamer.
Yeah, maybe.
But how much coffee cream? Because
Well, evidently, the lady likes her sugary sweets, which is fine, really.
Not surprised. Somehow that seems right, doesn't it?
Rebecca and I are basically the same person.
Yeah, we know this.